No, he's probably gonna be wearing his regular clothes. Cowboy boots with the fancy.
I thought for sure you were
For my Air Force.
go up with a pair of Crocs.
Yeah.
We know what to get him now. We know what to get him.
The mayor is here to get us all in line.
It sounded to me like they're almost like preparing. See, that's what I'm worried about.
All kinds of stuff just laid out.
I got my outfits. I've got athletes at home.
It should be pretty nice. Accelerate.
Because it's May. Just don't care.
What? Let's do it.
I keep forgetting.
Close.
It's full on. Why aren't you?
I disagree.
It was really nice.
I've learned a long time this year.
Oh, well, just a practice situation or a life jacket. That's all I had. Yeah. I don't remember. I forgot mine, and thankfully it didn't end up reading Nope. No, it was really nice.
But last year.
Mayor, how's Cookie?
Cookie's good, but we did not run this morning, so she's gonna have.
Holiday here.
Oh, I am just about to go every day to. So it is. All right. We need it. Okay, strategic planning, Jason Bachelor, and Letitia.
So,
Kelly.
this is a follow-up from the winter workshop. You all remember we spent some time. We got lots of good feedback from council. We told you we were going to take that, go back, start working to summarize that, and then come back to you all. So we are back. We're going to kind of walk that through. Letitia's going to kind of show you how we've started to summarize that information you all have given us, and then what the next steps are and what this looks like moving forward. So we're going to throw it over to Letitia. If you have any questions as we go ahead and just, let's ask questions as we go.
Did they take out all the complaints about me?
Okay, so good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm Letitia Callanan, Strategy and Performance Manager. I'm going to begin with a brief overview of the strategic and operational planning model that was shared with you at the winter workshop. What this graphic illustrates is the model that we are working to implement to align strategic and operational planning with our budgeting process to continuously improve operations to achieve the City of Aurora's strategic outcomes. Next, this is the strategic and operational planning elements that we're going to focus on this morning. beginning with strategic outcomes. So today, we're going to go over the definitions of these elements, which were shared with you prior to the February workshop, and then I'll provide an update of the status of our work to develop the remaining elements. And this was based on the input we received from you in February. So to define our City of Aurora strategic outcomes, these are our conditions of well-being for our community and environment, and it's basically what success looks like for our community. And here we have those 5 strategic outcomes, and stated in another way, our 5 City of Aurora strategic outcomes shown here reflect successful end results of our comprehensive core services and community programming.
So real quick, I'll pause here. So one of the things I've done since our time in February is I've started doing employee meeting with employee groups, kind of walking them through these 5 outcomes, letting them know about the discussion we've had, and then really making sure, as we talk to you all about here, that our departments and our employees groups see themselves in at least one, if not multiple, of these areas. And so we've started having those conversations, again, so that they understand how their work aligns with the strategic priorities and outcomes that you all are looking for and you all are wanting to see us align with. So we've had those conversations. They're going to continue over the coming weeks and months. But again, that's part of it, is again making sure that not only are we having these conversations, but we're pushing them down into the departments.
The strategic and operational planning element that we're currently working on is developing our strategic initiatives. Our strategic initiatives are defined as visionary, long-term, which is 5 or more years, focused, purposeful, and deliberate efforts requiring the alignment of multiple departments to achieve City of Aurora strategic outcomes. And these initiatives will reflect City Council and community priorities that serve as our areas of focus for improving conditions of well-being for our community and environment. And these initiatives will require the coordination of multiple departments. So back at our winter workshop, we asked you to collaborate among your council peers and city department heads to develop strategic initiative ideas that would contribute towards achieving those 5 outcome areas. While our time was limited to about 90 minutes, the collaborative process yielded some really impressive results. But before we move on to those results, I wanted to share with you the feedback that I received from council and from city staff. So this was from the Plus Delta AHA survey tool that was used by our moderator after the brainstorming session. And this is just a summary of common responses to this. And your feedback is really greatly appreciated and will be used as we move forward and plan future events. So thank you for that. So next, the process that we went through that day generated 489 improvement ideas that you believe will contribute toward the achievement of each of the 5 outcomes. Our analysis of all of these ideas began first by working with our facilitators from that day and management to organize the initial grouping of Post-its done at the workshop. We had those facilitators walk us through the process that was used that morning to group all of the different Post-it notes. Then Mike, our moderator from REMPEX of that day, and I further analyzed all 489 ideas and within each outcome and category and looked for common themes that went across the outcome areas and really stood out. And what we found of this first level analysis were 3 themes that will help provide lenses for management to examine potential initiatives throughout and keep in mind when making decisions around what needs to be accomplished for the City of Aurora to become a high-performing organization. And the first one is plan the work and work the plan. From this, we recognize the need to establish sound, effective plans and processes, and then work to implement them as planned. Second, shift to valuing people and managing process. We acknowledge that we need to value our people and manage to include improving and streamlining our key processes. The third management lens that we will use as we continue our efforts is to intentionally focus on meaningful public and employee engagement at all levels. And Jason, did you want to
Yeah,
add
so
anything?
check in here. So this is one where, as you know, that first one, when we talk about plan the work and work the plan, we want to move from being reactive to proactive. And so that is this idea that to be a high-performing organization, we have to make sure that we are efficiently and effectively processing the bulk of our work. So we want 95% of that work to be handled in an effective manner, kind of within systems that were set up that are efficient and effective. We know that, you know, a large organization with a variety of services we provide, we're gonna have some exceptions to that, right? And so we want to make sure that we're handling those exceptions on an exceptional basis. But if we don't have processes and systems in place where we're handling the bulk of our work efficiently, effectively within our normal day-to-day operations, that's where you turn reactive. And that is, it's very labor intensive, it's very work intensive to try and handle everything on an exceptional basis. So we've got to make sure that we are, from a day-to-day operation standpoint, handling the routine on a routine. That is more efficient. That allows us to then focus on some of those strategic initiatives, which are going to then give us the opportunity to kind of move the organization forward, make significant change over time. So that's on that one. In terms of shifting to valuing people and managing processes, a lot of the comments we heard really were around employees, retention, attraction, all those different things. And so that is, I think we want to make sure that we're, again, valuing our people, and then that, you know, in the processes, we're setting clear expectations for our employees. They are our most valuable resource. We want to make sure that they understand what's being expected of them, and that we've then got in place those processes where they can officially execute and work on them. And then finally, we want to make sure that, again, we are a service organization. So for our customers, and those are businesses, residents, visitors, any of the variety of customers that we provide, we want to make sure that we're truly connecting well with them and understanding what they're looking for, and that we're providing great service. So that's kind of how these are the different themes we looked at. You know, we say themes because obviously you all gave us some really specific instances, and we'll talk a little bit more about this is one lens we've talked about. And so when we've been talking about it as a team, sometimes we talk about kind of looking at things, you know, horizontally or across all the different outcomes. And then when we get to an outcome and some of that specific things, we're trying to develop those into specific initiatives. And so this is kind of, again, themes that we're looking at and making sure that we are, this helps us organize all that feedback that we've got.
So next, our next process was inputting all 480 ideas entered into one spreadsheet.
Letitia, did you get to do that, or did you have the?
I had a little bit of help.
A little bit of help. Okay, good. All right. So we told you we would not lose that. I want you to. You can see here literally. There's the column that says Post-it notes. So they transcribed all 489 Post-it notes. So we have them. Okay. So we want you all to know that we promised you we would do that. We have done that, and then we have tried to then sort of, again, organize them into themes, organize them by strategic outcomes. So we want you to rest assured that they are there.
So nothing is lost, and we mapped all of these ideas to the corresponding strategic outcome and the idea categories that they were grouped in, such as employee, process improvement, infrastructure, housing, capital improvements, community engagement, public safety response, and more. So once we were able to get everything mapped, that allowed us to get to where we are currently at, which is here you can see them in an easier to read format where they're grouped into the number of ideas per different category per each strategic outcome. So now what we're doing is we're working as a team to compare our current high priority projects and plans that the departments are currently developing or executing to see where there is an existing alignment among all of the ideas. Then we're going to work together to create potential strategic initiatives that capture the ideas generated under each outcome and category. And we'll show an example of this later on in the presentation.
Yeah, we had a comment. We'll get you guys these numbers in this summary on this. This is one we're happy to do. And again, and this kind of helps us, prioritize, right? So if we're seeing something where it's got 15 or 20 Post-it notes on it, I think for us, that's kind of represents, more consensus, more feedback on that. And so that doesn't mean that the items that, maybe only have 2 or 3 aren't good ideas, but just in terms of what we're hearing frequently, obviously there's a lot of thoughts around those different ideas.
Can I get a copy of this? I just can't see the safe one.
Yep.
I just wanted to see it.
Sure. No, we'll get you guys a summary of that. Yep.
I'm sorry, I could have held it there. Okay, so yeah, there's 119 ideas under SAFE, but yes, we can get you that. So as we continue using this collaborative exercise, we will further analyze where there are maybe gaps in alignment and where there is an evident need to develop an additional strategic initiative that captures new ideas and bring them to life. This process will take time to fully develop thoughtful strategic initiatives that meet the definition of being visionary, long-term, focused, purposeful, and deliberate efforts, requiring the alignment of multiple departments to achieve City of Aurora strategic outcomes. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jason to describe the next element, which is action plans, which is at the operational level.
So as we talked about, you all are giving us that strategic initiatives, and then one of the other concerns I think I've heard from some of you all, either in that meeting or independently in our conversations, is again, okay, so once we do a strategic plan, how do we actually make sure that it's not just a plan on the shelf? And so our task then as your staff is to make sure that we are operationalizing that strategic guidance. And so the way you see that is what we're calling action plans. So these are things that are going to be created by departments, and whether that's one or more, where we're taking operational steps to make sure that we're taking steps to implement those strategic initiatives. And we'll show you an example of that here in a second. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So you can see there the outcome on economically strong. And what we are currently working on, so you've seen how we've summarized things, started reviewing all of them. One of the things that we are working on is to take all of that feedback that you've given us and come up with strategic initiatives. So what you'll see there is that 4.1, that is an example of a potential strategic initiative around economically strong. So we had a number of Post-it notes, and so what we've taken those and we've summarized those into evaluating and implementing development best practice strategies for retail, entertainment, and other diverse business, commercial, and industrial sectors. So for example, some of the Post-it notes we had on that were...
We had things like retail strategy for the city, add high-end retail and restaurants, build attractive special event space, create an incentive fund for targeted industries, encourage public-private partnership, and diversify industry.
So
those were just 6 of 31 different ideas.
So we had lots. So you see how those things, so hopefully you all see some of those comments and recognize some of those Post-it notes you've given us. We've kind of take those, group them together into this, and then so we're going to take that as our strategic guidance of what council wants to see. And then our task as your staff is to then operationalize that. So you kind of see down here, we're developing action plans. These are some of the different departments that are involved in terms of developing action plans to operationalize around that strategic initiative we've heard from you all.
So under development services, that's everything that, in terms of planning, going all the way through the entire, from when an application comes in, or is that?
I'd say it's actually so in terms of our development and review process, it's going to be development services and probably planning and business development, because obviously planning and business development is going to be around site planning, zoning, all those things. And then on the development services side, that's going to be our engineering review, building review, those sides of it. But those two departments are absolutely key in terms of our, in terms of our development and review processes. And then,
I'll finish and then I'll...
And so, that's on that front. As you heard, I think one of the things we've heard from PED is, again, around a retail strategy. So, again, we've started discussions on that. So, again, that's another action plan where, as we develop a retail plan, you'll see that there reflect as well.
So and maybe I'm jumping ahead, so stop me if I am. But I like the way that this is laid out. The one thing I think is important in order to make sure that it's not just another plan on the shelf is making sure that there's key metrics, what are the KPIs that are like short term toward these things.
Yep.
So it's not just we want to get here? What are the things we're going to, at the end of the year, measure and say, this was the results that we came from the actions?
Yeah, and so that's part of that as well. So as we develop these action plans, and one of the next steps is actually making sure that we have the resources, right? So then there's a resource allocation discussion around, are we properly resourcing these efforts? And resources, I think, is going to drive some of those KPIs, right? So if we put this much resources into it, we think we can move the needle this much, versus we put this much resource into it, maybe there's an expectation that we're moving that needle a little bit faster depending on what's going on. But yes, part of this is as we develop those action plans and understand what we're trying to accomplish, we will have KPIs that are going to help us understand, define what success is, and then know how we're making progress towards it.
Jason, so I just wanted to ask, so I appreciate the retail strategy, but a lot of our centers, we have a lot of older centers. So to me, is there something in this that talks about how we're going to make sure that the older centers that we have, like in my ward, we have quite a few that are going to be making sure that they're, we have the retail there, the safety issues, the repurposing, or anything like that? Which I think, because to me, it seems like what we're talking about here is just everything new.
No, so I'll let Janine talk a little bit.
And as part of Janine Restad, Director of Planning and Business Development, as part of the retail strategies, we're doing them ward specific. So they are going to be tailored to the types of shopping centers, the demographics, plus having one citywide. So we will be addressing.
And to your point, I think going back to Councilmember Zvonik's point is, again, understanding what is our current retail outlook in each of those wards, and understanding where do we want to go, right? And so depending on the ward, that may be retention of existing, maybe refurbishment of services of different centers. So I think it really does depend upon the ward, which is why I think Janine and her staff decided to look at that by ward, because it varies, right? What's needed in Ward 6 is probably different than what's needed in Ward 1, which is what's different in Ward 2.
Yeah, that was part of the whole retail strategy plan.
Yep.
I just want to make sure that was.
No, understood. That's a good question.
Sometimes we just talk about new, so.
Yeah, and that's also probably why, again, as we move down through these, you'll see you get a different level of detail, right? Again, I acknowledge, that outcome we're looking for, economically strong, very broad as we move down to, and so when you see 4.1, that's 0.1 because we're going to have multiple initiatives. That's not the only initiative we're going to have under economically strong. You'd see a 4.2, 4.3, right? So we're still taking all of that different feedback to develop multiple initiatives, and each one of those initiatives is probably a little more specific as to some of the feedback we've got. But even those are still relatively high level, certainly a little more specific than the outcome. But then as we develop those action plans, now those action plans get a different level of specificity, get a different level of expectation in terms of, timing, and how we're moving forward. So that's, again, I want you to understand how these things kind of, how the hierarchy works. Questions on these? And again, so this is an example because, as you all hopefully can imagine, with 489 Post-it notes, we are working through developing these strategic initiatives, and so we wanted to kind of share with you all the direction we're moving, how and where we're going. So our next steps, and we'll share. Go ahead and let's go to the next steps. So our next steps are to go ahead and continue that data analysis. We're going to then continue to develop those initiatives, and then we're going to come back to you all with those initiatives, those specifically. So you'll see for each one of those outcomes, 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. So you'll see different initiatives that we're developing. Make sure you all are comfortable with where that is. Have a discussion around what that looks like. And then the goal of is to get through that, so then when we get to resource alignment, when we get to the budget, that's where we make sure that we have the resources to take action on our strategic initiatives. So that's how we're going to do these. That's how you're going to see these reflected. We've talked individually, probably not in the 2025 budget because this is still a work in progress, but probably 2026 and beyond, you'll see potentially some significant restructuring of how we talk about the budget, right? If we're successful in this about understanding the strategic direction of council and we're having discussions around strategic resource alignment, that's what's going to drive our budget discussions, right? So sort of that level of discussion, not necessarily sort of very, very tactical level things, right? And I guess I skipped over this going back, but as you can imagine, with 489 Post-it notes, some of those were very specific. They were very specific, and we've noted that. And in some cases, I will tell you that we've pulled those out and said, hey, this is very particular to a particular area, to a particular thing. And so we've taken those, and then we are taking action on them. You may not see them, sort of boil up. And so those are definitely things that we've identified. Some of you all got very granular in the weeds. And so when we talk about summarizing things at a high level, you lose that granularity sometimes as we do that. Now, some of those things were very specific, and I didn't want you all to think that we're ignoring them. Some of those are just things that we have to pull aside and go, great, let's go take care of this and take action on it.
So at the budget workshop is where you'll say, this was a high priority, however, we don't have resources to fulfill that.
Or hey, these are the resources we're setting aside for that.
Okay.
And I would say that when it's an organization this large, budgeting is always a prioritization exercise. We have to decide, even within the high priorities you all have told us, what are the highest priorities, right? So that's always part of the discussion.
And that's where I would hope that the goals would drive that conversation. And then and having some longer term outlooks and saying, over the next 3 years, we want retail growth to be X, like a big number, something that you might, that Janine's like, I don't know if we can do that. Like, that's the number that it should do. It's true, though, that kind of a goal, right? 3 years out, if anybody says, yes, we can do it, then that's not really a goal.
Right, yeah.
It should be something that's more stretched, or, diversifying the industries that we want to do that by whatever %. Because that helps us. I think if we know where we're going and you say, hey, in order to get there, here are some of the smaller steps this year and next year we need to take, but we need more resources here, then it forces us to have those tough conversations about resource allocation.
Good, understood, yep. Letitia, did I miss anything?
No?
I'm going to look over at my team, Laura, Roberto, Marshall, anything we've talked about that we probably need to bring up? It's good. Okay. So again, this is very high level. Wanted you all to understand that this is, again, obviously, hopefully you see a lot of work going on in there. So, and you understand the next steps that are coming back to you all in terms of those initiatives. We will get you a summary of that Post-it note count by those different things. And then let's go back to that. Was that, we've talked about this, again, as I told you, we look at this two different ways. So as Letitia showed you, one of the things we did is try to categorize that, I'll call it vertically. So this is around, on the economically strong, development, revenue, capital project planning. Those are what I would call sort of vertical alignments. And then the other thing we've done is going back to those themes, plan the work, work the plan, valuing people, sort of connecting. So those are what I've referred to as the horizontal kind of lens. And I think we've got similar counts on those. So what we'll do is we'll provide you both sets of counts so you kind of see how we're looking at things both vertically in terms of how to organize these in terms of different project areas or operational areas, as well as sort of those themes, so you all can kind of see that. So we'll provide you, it'll probably be a two-pager in terms of that. So one on this and then one on the other.
Customer service is always going to be top, even though, I know people individually probably put them, but, that is obviously part of, you said we're a service organization.
So what's interesting, so that's when you talk about, if you go back to this one, you remember here, we have our values, and then we have our bedrock practices. And so that's where we've talked about it. So there's often, how we do things, in my Army days, the expression was, mission first, people always. So it's that type of thing, right? We always care about our people. We're always doing what we need to make sure we're safe. So you don't see it show up as a horizontal, or it's understood. We take care of our people, right? And so that's what values are. That's what our bedrock practices are. These are just inherent in how we approach the work. And you're right, customer service is a value. We are a service organization. We value that, and we're making sure that we're doing that, across the board.
That's it. Thank you.
Great, good job.
All right, so that was put us ahead of schedule a little bit. I know you're all really disappointed to hear that, but all right. Greg, you're starting early.
All right. Howdy, everyone. I love the old adage, April showers bring budget discussion. All right. Okay, all right.
Greg has a brief 804 slide presentation.
Mason said I could have until noon. No, I'm not gonna take a lot of your time. I'm gonna talk a little bit about some economic indicators. We did get the leads data. For all of you, about 80% of our revenue streams come from this Colorado leads.
And real quick, just to lead by example, stop Greg if you ever have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, just go ahead and.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll just go that way, and then that just because it is a long presentation, number of slides, so.
Just like with your ward meetings, I'm not gonna read every word. So you've got it with you. If you have any questions, later, just call me up, let me know. We're going to look at some economic indicators. We're going to look at how 2023 general fund ended. A little bit about how 2024 is going so far. 2025, we're going to talk about how we're going to balance 2025. 2026 is currently not balanced, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Get into some capital, and then finally we've got a couple issues in the risk fund and marijuana fund. And there we go. So, economic indicators. So all of this, I stole this data from the Leeds School of Business. So if you, they have about a 50-page, 50-slide deck. They came and talked to you once. It was awfully thick, if you guys remember that, them coming and talking. So if you want that to happen again, that's great. I picked and chose a couple of things, actually asking them, you know, what's the most important points? And they had a point that I thought was excellent. The economy is currently operating at near full capacity with little upside potential for stronger economic growth. Which gets to a point. It is hard to grow on growth. All right? If we're already doing well, it's hard to jump to that next level. All right? So, inflation. Inflation, although down from its peak, let's see if this works. Yes, it does. Down from its peak a couple years ago is still positive. All right? Inflation is still going up. It's still an issue. It's going to be an issue for us. Interesting point, Colorado has been over the national inflation level for 11 of the last 14 years.
Wow, fire them.
That's a pretty big deal. That's going to affect us. That's going to affect all of you. Right? Here's an interesting one. When I talk to them about what they're worried about, look at this, personal income and savings. People are making more money than ever. That's the top line. They're spending more money than ever. That's the middle line. The savings is almost at the rate of the Great Recession. Wow. Interesting point. They say that's the one thing that worries them about nationally, a risk of a downside. I just thought that was interesting. All right, your labor, this is wild. National Colorado, this chart looks a lot like the chart I showed you last year, where there's more jobs than there are people, right? But you'll notice, nationally, they're starting to close up, right? Colorado, they're still wide apart. There's still a lot of jobs out there and less unemployed, which means, and we're going to talk about turnover here in a while, it's going to continue to be hard to hire and keep.
So real quick, I see the ratios up there. Go ahead and give us a quick explanation or definition of what that ratio represents. Do I take that right, that that's 1.4 jobs for every one person looking?
Yes.
Okay.
And we're at 1.9 jobs for every one person unemployed. So interesting, yes.
I'd be interested to know what those jobs are.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask.
You know what? That's a really great question. Would you write that one down? I think I've got some background data. I'll go look at the 800 slides that they gave me, and I'll bet you there's something in there.
And it's probably, I think the next one they can boil down to is probably by sector.
Yeah, I do think they do it by sector, and I do think that a lot of the jobs that are currently are the starter level jobs are the ones that aren't being filled.
Lost her job.
Because people, and people where they have to go to work.
They actually do some work.
I can't work from home.
Okay, everybody pay attention to Greg, please. Go ahead.
All right, okay, this one I thought was interesting. This is actually last year's chart of employment recovery. And you'll notice, back last year, anything that's in the orange area are places that they were actually losing employment. All right? Colorado is kind of in the middle, but not very many that were very positive, so it was looking pretty good. Colorado was in a pretty good place. Look at it this year. No negatives. Colorado, in comparison, is one of the ones that isn't growing as much. All other states are catching up, which is interesting. I asked them about this, going, "Wow, that sounds horrible." They're actually, "No, that's good news. Colorado has been ahead. Other states are catching up. Colorado is still doing well, but it's hard to grow on growth." To that point, now I'm not going to go through all of this. If you have any questions on it, please feel free. I want you to look up there at these. So this is the rank in the nation. So if you're 42nd, it's like, oh my gosh, you're almost at the bottom of the 50 states. Personal income growth and per capita personal income growth, we're 42nd. But yet, personal income, we're 6th in the nation. It's hard to grow on growth. Other states are catching up, but it's hard to grow on growth. I thought this one was interesting too. FHFA Home Price Index. I promise there are no cuss words in FHFA. But we're 42nd, 44th in the nation. Our housing isn't growing as fast. Our housing prices aren't growing as fast as the rest of the nation right now. It's kind of good news. Yes?
Do they look at state by state on regulations and if that has affected any of this?
You know what?
We've had a lot of regulations in our state.
I'm going to say yes. And I don't know that they enumerated it on a slide, but I can tell you one of the things that they said. Paying attention to some of the risks that appear unique to Colorado. In particular, given the higher rate of inflation in 11 of the past 14 years, the relatively higher cost of living, there's a concern that near consumption growth could lag the nation. Additionally, while property values have increased across other areas of the country, the way property assessments and taxes work in Colorado mean that state residents face an unusually high increase in property taxes relative to most other states, which could reduce disposable personal income spent on other goods and services.
That's just the repeal of Gallagher, though.
Say that one.
That's the repeal of Gallagher. We're repealing that now.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that they take into account, look at other states and how other states react. Let me get my water. Give it on.
Greg, are there any slides that indicate which states are losing industry to other states?
Would you write that one down? I'll go take a look through there. Right offhand, I don't remember one because they kind of focused pretty quickly on Colorado. But I'll go take a look. All right, any other questions? That was my last slide on economics. But the point of all of this is that what they do is they're going to take this national data and then they consolidate it for Colorado. And then they take that Colorado data and consolidate it for Aurora. All right, so it all fits in. All right, so now I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about where we ended 2023. This 2023 was good news. We ended netting about $7 million in additional usable operating reserve funds, almost all due to auto use tax and end-of-year audit revenue. We got a check, I think it was about $2.5 million in December. Completely unexpected. That was the majority of that $7 million was that check. Okay, so good news. We fully funded your recession reserve. All right, the one you had us build a couple years ago, that's fully funded. Fully funded the Tabor Policy Reserve. Our sales tax, which has been kind of weird the last several years during COVID, we were just slightly over. We projected 4.7, it came in at 5, right about in the right ballpark where we wanted. Expenditures ended up a little over projection, capital transfer. And by the way, all of these you see in the spring supplemental. The capital transfer was more, that was in the supplemental. The risk fund transfer, I'm going to talk more about risk here in a little bit, but we had to send more money. We needed more budget, we had to send more money over to the risk fund. And then we reappropriated some things that just didn't get around to spending in 2023, reappropriating it in 2024. So taking all of that into account, we've got about $7 million. It's about 1%. little over 1%. Other funds, capital projects fund, better bottom line, that additional $10 million definitely helped that fund. We're going to commit a lot for local matches. We've got some other things. I've got a slide here in a little while where we'll talk about the pain points that are coming up. That's going to help us cover some of those needs. The risk fund I've already kind of talked about. That incurred but not reported, and I've talked about this thing before. It's called an IBNR. It's where an actuary comes up and says, you know, you don't even know what's coming down the pipe yet. You're paying for things, you're going to have to pay for more. That IBNR that they gave us was up over $5 million. It was $2 million for the last 4 years. Back when Jason was a lowly budget officer, it actually went up and down and up and down.
And what is that attributed to?
So it's attributed to the fact that every claim out there can be 7 figures or 8 figures, whatever. It's attributed to the fact that a lot of places, a lot of insurance companies don't even want to talk to municipalities.
Yeah, I heard that.
So there's a lot. Things are becoming more expensive and bigger, and so that's part of the world that we're talking about. We're actually going to be making some changes in how we account for things based on what's going on with that, because that's untenable. We can't spend all this money and set all this money aside. It's just it's exponential. Yes.
Where are most of these claims coming from? Is it coming from certain departments? Is it coming from?
Okay, so workman's comp.
Potholes.
I'd say workman's comp. I'd say a lot of it's going to be public safety. I mean, your big ticket items are probably public safety.
We've seen it, I think, also on facilities. I think actually you may have seen it on your homeowner's insurance in terms of that. There's been, across the state, there's been some significant numbers of homeowners claims, which is then reflected in our property insurance. So it's certainly across the board, but I think, Greg, it's workers' comp, it's public safety. Those are the primary ones driving it.
Yeah.
And I'll just add,
But public safety is higher, right?
if I could, I'd just add that, we have 3 categories. We've got workers' comp, we have general liability, and then we have auto liability. All of those areas have experienced increases. Some of them are inflationary in nature, and I think Greg hit that point very well. So costs are going up, but then claims have gone up everywhere.
And I'm going to give you some details in about 40 or so, no, not 40 slides, about 20 slides on that. Anybody else? Yes?
Well, just so across Colorado, depending upon industries and so forth, that's what we're seeing is if there's high claims, we all basically pay.
I am certain that that's true, that it's not just Aurora. I will say, some big ticket claims have come through recently in the last couple of years, which has hurt us, and we've got to wait for those to kind of come off the books to have that IBNR and the rest of the costs go down. But yeah, but it is national. It's a state thing. It's a national thing.
Don't they categorize government altogether? So anything that happens within any government entity also gets thrown into our bucket, basically? Because E470, their claims or their insurance went up dramatically, and then the insurance company didn't want to renew, so we had to go back out to the market. But one of the things that they said was, there's hardly any more insurance companies that want to insure. They're like leaving the state. But then secondly was some of the claims that happen in the municipalities still affected E470 authority because it's public-private. So they got thrown into the bucket of, even though it wasn't their claim.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense that would happen.
Yeah, I think I don't know if they go so far as to separately rate
They said
government as a whole, but I think
government.
But I think they certainly do look at your claim experience, and I think your claim experience is broadened out to that more. That's where they'll do it sort of, based on, both your individual entity as well as, kind of the sector.
I'm sure when the state legislature changes the rules relative, to personal liability, that it's got to affect us all.
Right.
Very good. Great discussion.
Greg, can I ask just about some of the other specifics around facilities?
Sure.
Does that include assessments like structurally deficient bridges, roads being washed out, that type of stuff that could result in serious kind of incidents.
And you're speaking specifically about the risk fund and the effect of like a bridge on the risk fund?
Right, or like right on Parker Road over Bellevue, we've had numerous sinkholes that we've had to redo over the last like 10 years. Does stuff like that show up? Or if it's not a claim, does it not show up, right? If it's a potential liability, but not a claim.
Right.
I would say typically, probably not, because we're going to do those repairs out of our capital projects fund or our other maintenance funds. And so we're, to your point, since we're not filing a claim against the risk fund, it's not an expense. So I think that's again, their basis for, you know, the IBNR. So I think that's the one where I don't think it's going into some of those rates because we're not paying for it out of the risk fund.
Unless there is something that happens and then a claim is there, and it's based on the claim.
Right, if a person's vehicle gets damaged in the process of there being a sinkhole or something like that.
That's right. That's right. A couple of funds that ended the year needing some work. Rec fund, you're going to hear about the rec fund later on today. Fleet fund got some increasing costs. The inflationary costs in the fleet fund are going up quite a bit. Parts, sublets. Sublets are when you hire somebody because you don't have enough people to get the work done. So those costs are going through the roof right now, which is why you saw a supplemental for FTE for the fleet fund, to try to counteract that. Marijuana tax revenue, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Going to need some work, but we can balance that. Several funds did better. Golf fund, conservation trust, development review, water, wastewater. All of those ended the year with funds available more than projected. Great. Let's look at our revenues. The current projection for 2024 is pretty darn close to budget. That's good news for us. Sales tax collections up $1.5 million versus budget through March. I'm going to show you a slide here in a little bit. A lot of variability. Bad months and good months, and heck if I know how to do a trend on that sort of thing, but we're on the right side of our sales tax. Capital-related miscellaneous revenues, audit recoveries, interest are all starting out fairly healthy. Interestingly enough, auto use tax is down, but because we ended the year strong, we're kind of pretty close to budget, kind of right on where we need to be. Year to date, we're at about $4 million, about 3.5% above budget. We're on the right side. I don't see any reason to move off our projection, off our budget numbers at the moment. Good news in kind of a wonky atmosphere. So let's talk about this wonky atmosphere. Here's your sales tax performance. You've seen this chart quite a bit. It's percent change from the prior year by month. So November was 3.2% higher than November of the prior year. A couple of interesting points in that.
So, and real quick, just a reminder, the numbers up there are for sales the prior month. So what happens is merchants, restaurants, everybody sells something in September. They then remit those taxes to the city in October. So when you're seeing a number up here for October, that represents September sales. So it's right. 1 month lag from the economic activity.
That's right. And to that point, this is your December Christmas sales.
It's our single biggest month.
All right. December was a bit of a bummer. February, up 13%. All right. Now, there's a little reason for this, and those of you that are in M&F have heard this already, or those of you who have already come and talked at your ward meetings have heard this. You've kind of got to take these two together. December, Jason's absolutely right, based on November sales. January is based on December sales. That's the Christmas season. This year, you had a lot more spending going on in November because Thanksgiving was so early.
Black Friday.
Black Friday was way early. So this ate some of the December sales.
All right. Just, I mean, to put that in an example, so there's, I don't know what it was, but let's say that, Black Friday occurred this year on the 21st or the 22nd. Compare that to maybe another year where Black Friday might occur on the 28th.
That's right.
There's a whole week there of additional Christmas season starting. So you see, the overall Christmas period kind of shift the balance between November, and December. So that's just, so when we look at it, and he's going to show you a slide here in a second, we look at it as both the full period.
It's pretty interesting this time. But I do want to point out something about March, and this is just wild. It's so hard to grow on growth. Watch this. March of 2024, 8.9% better than March of 2023, which was 15.2% better than March of 2022, which was 7.2% better than the prior month.
Can I tell you why?
Yes, please.
I'll tell you why. I think it's directly coming from folks like Steve Sundberg and I in the service industry, because the Nuggets last year, it was a nightmare. I had to miss, I think, a town hall because I had to physically go work. And we may see that trend again.
Go Avs, go Nugs.
No,
Nuggets.
I think it's the service industry right now contributing to that.
Build that into the projection, Nuggets.
All right, there we go.
Nuggets win the final.
If they don't, we'll send a bill to Nicholas.
Standing room only at the bars in Aurora for these Nuggets games. Maybe they should stop sweeping so that we can get 7 games instead of 4. They win 5. They win 5 championship.
That's-
They win 5.
That's amazing thinking. I love it.
I'm telling you, it's record numbers. Record numbers. I've been in business for 15 years.
Yeah, we need more home games.
Yeah.
How about the Avs last night?
Yeah.
They won too.
Oh my gosh.
I'll show up when it's busy, though.
All right, so
I'll save a seat for you.
you got that, and then Jason's right. What we do is we take holiday sales and we lump it together. We take that, the December and January, and that becomes holiday sales for the year. This is an interesting kind of bad news story. We were down in holiday sales compared to last year. 0.3% down. The last time we were down in holiday sales was when Jason was a lowly budget officer and caused the Great Recession back in 2009.
And now
That's
it's
'cause people are going to
no
the
correlation at all.
I did the same thing. It's like, it's got to be him. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. The first time we've been down in a decade.
Because inflation, so people are going to consignment stores.
And inflation should be more money to us.
But just so we're clear, again, when we say growth, this is going back to it. If you look, we had
Goodwill's not a
a
consignment.
period there where it was doing nothing but getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So from an absolute dollar amount,
You are not one of those.
we're huge.
We're much better.
So,
absolute dollar amount.
saying we're down 0.3% is not as good as growing at 4 or 5%, but it effectively means we brought in the exact same dollar amount as we did the year prior. But as we talk about balancing that with all the factors of increased costs for, everything, right? Just all of it, inflation, food, everything else, all the things that we have, keeping up with the employment market. So that's our challenge, right? So which is how do we keep up with our increasing costs and continue to grow revenue in an environment where we've seen significant growth year over year.
Yes.
With respect to the marketplace facilitator revenue, like how much of this is because we had such a huge growth when we started collecting that tax versus now that's just part of our baseline?
And you know what? You've hit it on the head. It's part of our base now. That yellow part is when we got the marketplace facilitator. By this year, it was already in our base. By this time, the growth doesn't matter much at all because it's already built into our numbers.
Good question.
If Bob Olindo was here, he could geek out on this subject for at length. But have we ever looked at how we are losing tax revenue to, say, Lone Tree?
Yes.
Based on how people want to shop, based on what they want here in Aurora.
You are exactly right. Bob Leva can come and talk to you for an hour on that. Yes, we do. He just came and gave a discussion to CBC on exactly that topic. And yes, they can do that. They do that. They do have the counts of where, and they've got their heat maps of where the money's coming from and where the money's going to.
Because I'm guilty of it. I know you're guilty of it.
My whole ward is guilty of it.
That's a lack of
That is not
loyalty in
true.
Ward 6.
I'm a part of that ward, and I shop Aurora.
I live in Ward 6, and I shop
I
Aurora
shop
too,
Aurora
so.
too, but, oh, you're all saying nobody goes to Park Meadows?
I don't anymore, because I don't.
Oh, we've gone rogue. We've gone rogue.
Driving to Southlands is hard enough for me.
I don't go to Park
I'm going. And I live in
Curtis, you don't shop.
All right. So let's get into the leads projection. It's a scholarly examination of Aurora revenues using economic inputs, national factors such as personal income, retail trade. They look at GDP, employment, vehicle sales, construction. Runs the gamut of what they look at. So the model, and I kind of touched on this before, national economy affects the Colorado economy, which affects the Aurora economy, and then they do the revenue projections from that. Listing of data and sources, the Moody's Analytics is probably the most important one for them. Moody's does a national projection, and they take that several projections, they take those projections, say, what if this is true? What if this is true? And go from there.
I just want to stop here. Chief Otten wanted to chime in here on his thoughts. He's done a detailed analysis of all the econometric inputs into this, and so.
Actually, my wife.
Oh, okay, all right.
She's been shopping
Okay, all right.
everywhere just to make sure that she contributes to all the tax revenue.
Keep it in her work. All right.
She can come shopping with me.
And so the way it works is they build us an optimistic, a baseline, and a pessimistic revenue projection. And for each one of those, then they've got bands. So this happens to be the baseline projection, high forecast and low forecast from that. So they've got these lines that we get to follow. All right? Typically, we follow the baseline projection. And that's what I'm using here. So the leads projection versus our current, this is just sales tax. Every one looks a little bit different, but basically, sales tax is actually a little bit less in this year's leads projection in the near term. It's stronger in the long term, but we kind of lose a little bit of money in the near term versus the projection. Auto use tax and capital use tax, when I show you those, we're just kind of stronger throughout. Property tax, they give us a property tax projection, but we don't use it because we've got Tabor, right? So we'll talk on that just a little bit. So sales tax, a lot of numbers here. I don't want you to focus on the numbers, but what I do want to point out, there's your line up there. There's what the budget book showed previously, and you'll notice the leads based. The leads actually 2024 projection was kind of lower. It was 3.1. Because we're over projection right now, I didn't feel like there was any reason to drop from that, so we're going to use our projection for that point. 2025 is a little bit less, and then it grows from there. Numbers are a little bit irrelevant, but you'll notice there's some negatives. In the near term, it gets more positive in the out term. And that's not much. This is actually, what this says to me is that last year's projection was pretty darn close. And really what they're doing is they're reiterating what they said last year. Yeah, we think we're pretty good.
Greg, I know this is a ways out, and I asked this to Jason. Of course, he didn't know, so I'll ask you.
Okay. We don't have enough time to talk about what I don't.
When will we start collecting, the city start collecting lodgers, sales, and revenue, or property tax from the Gaylord? Do you know what year that is?
Oh, golly. 40 years from 10 years ago? Did it open about 10 years ago? So maybe in another 30 years?
Is that real? That's real?
I thought it was
a long ass time, but
I'm looking at
long time.
Yeah, we'll
I'm being very serious. I'd like to know when it is, because everybody tells me a different number, and I've heard 15, I've heard 30. I'd like to know.
Well, I have a question about that too, and maybe someone from planning can tell me, I don't know. Because they're talking about massive expansions with convention centers and stuff like that. Is there any way to renegotiate that and say, you know, or just no matter how big they get?
I wasn't on council when that was negotiated.
There was no negotiation.
we'll get you guys detail on both current agreement and when it runs through and what we can do that.
I think there might be an article out there about that by somebody.
Gave away the farm.
One thing on the Gaylord is what we're hearing from some of the surrounding developers is that there is spillover. There's more demand for hotels, for retail restaurants. So hopefully what we're going to benefit from is more growth in that area and the tax generating.
We're doing a $1.5 billion expansion.
See, and that's where I want to know on this, convention space, on this expansion that they're looking at. I mean, can we collect sales tax from renting out that space, that convention space, that?
Well, no.
Still can't.
Not yet.
Still can't.
No. It was a pretty broad agreement, and I'll just say that additions to the property are also inclusive in that agreement. And, when it's over, then that's when we'll really have the windfall. But the surrounding development, I think, is the key, that we are getting revenue in the surrounding area as development is occurring.
And I just have a question on this, on the incentive as well. So that included use taxes, so if any new buildings, we don't get use tax from either, right?
On the property.
On the property.
On the
Okay.
property.
Okay.
All right. So,
Interject one thing on that.
so kind of blah in the near term, better in the.
Marshall's gonna.
Oh, sorry.
There are some interesting protections we tried to build into those agreements for water connection fees, that there is some room for discussion, but council may hear about that when we tell Gaylord they get to pay connection fees.
Wow, who cared?
So
Tell them, come talk to us.
just want you to be aware,
I'll be right here.
build some protections in there specific to those connection fees.
We'll just have to conveniently for like 2 weeks, quadruple the price.
And one more point about the project, I think, how the incentive was not being ignored. There were multiple locations in competition for that facility. So it really is an asset to Aurora, and, part of that was the negotiation of those revenues.
I don't even want to be subsidizing their water.
No.
And as Marshall said, we did cap it, so that's one of the,
Yeah.
I mean, they already got it.
Curtis had a question.
But if we were to increase the lodger's tax, we would be able to capture that, correct?
I've got to go look at that. I don't know if we can increase the lodger's tax on Gaylord. I seem to remember a rule that said that if we increase the lodger's tax, they get to keep it.
Holy
It
shit.
would just be included in their incentive, right?
I believe it would be,
Slap me around and call me Susan.
we'd have to leave them. Yeah.
We need to look at like our permitting fees, all of our fees for this period of time that they're under construction. Unreal.
So let's look at auto use tax. Auto use tax, stronger throughout on there. The budget office has been bearish on auto use tax for quite a while now. It seems to go up and up, and I didn't trust it going up and up. Their projections have us gaining some revenue, and so I asked about it, and they actually make some pretty valid salient points. Let me read this to you. A consensus forecast, which presents 28 independent forecasts, shows consensus expectations for growth in the number of auto and light truck sales nationally in both 2024 and 2025. This is part and due to the strong economy predicted for Colorado in those 2 years compared to the U.S. economy. Overall inflation is also higher in Colorado versus the U.S., and personal income growth is higher in Colorado versus the U.S. And what they're saying, and I guess I'm going to choose to believe them, is that we're going to continue to see auto sales go on. I didn't trust it in the past, but I think that we've been wrong. We've been awfully conservative in this. They've been closer. Their projections have been closer to reality in the last 2 or 3 years. So this is what it gets you. Good money in the out years, reasonable money near term. So let's look at property tax. Property tax will be based on the table limit as opposed to leads growth. Because we've got that table limit, anything over and under that property tax, we're going to be giving back. The table growth allows us to grow, but based on new growth and inflation. This is one of the places that's actually, if we have more inflation, it's kind of good news because it increases that table line to where we get to keep a little bit more of it. We're going to keep we're going to give back all of the money over that table limit. By the way, this is a big number now. Our current projection is somewhere between $12 and $15 million is what we'll be returning this year in the Tabor refund. We do it in arrears, so we collect it first, and then we do the temporary tax credit.
And that's assuming nothing happens, all right? Because there's a ballot measure and the legislature just introduced something to try to temper the outrageous growth we've seen as a result.
Yeah, and you know what? So this 15 million, before they did what they did in November,
Yeah.
our projection of that was somewhere around 15 to 18.
Yeah.
And now it's around 12 to
And
15.
the ballot measure that's coming forward would be a massive cut to this, which would all just lower what we get back.
Lower what we get back.
Yeah.
Yep.
Greg, how do we give it back?
We do what's called a temporary tax credit. So what we do, we have a mill levy that's 8.605 mills, and then what we do is we lower that mill levy to where people pay less than 8.605 for the year on property taxes.
The city assesses toward the property tax. Because that's what that is.
Interesting factoid, and those of you who have gone to your ward meetings, I've been beating the drum about this. The reason that everybody's paying so darn much more taxes has to do with the fact that when they reassess based on quarters, 2 specific quarters. So it's quarter 2020, quarter 2 of 2022, based on quarter 2 of 2022. That's the single highest line on that entire chart, was that 1 month. And by the way, the time we're in right now is Q2 of 2024. The comparison between here and where we are right now will be the next assessment. And it will be less. A little bit. It's been dropping off. You notice in both of these lines. By the way, I stole this from Arapahoe County. You can go to the Arapahoe County website and they've got more data on this. And kind of citywide, or sorry, area-wide. Yes.
You're at my next couple weeks during my budget workshop, but people are really confused on metro district taxes. And so when we get into the discussion of, how much, like ours went down, our property tax because of Tabor, they're not understanding why metro districts, some of them, went drastically up and some of them didn't. And then Saria is incorporated, I didn't know this, but Saria is incorporated in the metro district tax, so you don't see it as a delineated line item.
Right. Yeah, all of that's fairly new to me as well.
Yeah.
And that discussion that we had with the person I thought was kind of eye-opening. But yeah, and I can.
So be ready.
Yeah, I'll do my best. All right. Any questions on property tax? All right, let's keep going. Capital related kind of is some good news. BMUT, greater base, lesser growth into the future. The fact of the matter is the last 3 months of 2023 was great in building material use tax. In order to get to our 2024 number, we'd have to have about a 40% reduction. I don't think we're going to do that. I think the leads projection is more reasonable at the moment. You'll notice after that, they've got us moving off, but fairly good numbers. This goes over to capital projects fund. Equipment use tax, a little bit of the opposite news. It's a little bit worse. I'm totally fine with that because we take those 2 numbers together and that becomes the CPF transfer. And as long as I can have some assurance that it feels reasonable, these feel reasonable. Long story short, here's operating versus capital. You got about $4 to $5 million coming in annually in the CPF. You'll notice the general fund starts out sort of blah. That $2 million is about not even 0.5% increase. It gets better in the out years. We already had a shortfall in 2025. We had an $8 million shortfall in 2026. Before we even start talking about additional expenditure issues, which we've got going on, we didn't cover our shortfalls. Okay? Some of the risks, still quite a bit of uncertainty regarding what the future holds. Inflation is still an issue. Regional financial issues are kind of interesting right now. Arapahoe County, Colorado Springs, Denver, And I haven't seen, I've heard about it, but I haven't seen any details on it. I've heard Fort Collins revenues slowing some. That kind of worries me. Ours appear to be doing okay, but when the whole area, when portions of an area start to decline, wonder whether we're lagging on something going on. Yes.
You've been perusing Arapahoe County's slides. Have you seen why their revenue is down?
You know what?
It's primarily for them property tax, so they're obviously very heavily reliant on property tax with the Gallagher and Tabor issues. They're not de-Bruced, and so that's, I think.
They're not Bruce. That's surprising. In East Arapahoe County.
So that is, so they're seeing those same cost increases we are. Their growth is capped.
Yeah.
They're not keeping up. They've asked to, we're trying to figure out a time, they would like to come into council and talk to council about their projections. They are intending to go to ballot this fall. They've looked at a property tax, they've looked at a sales tax, so they would like to make a presentation to you all to kind of help you all understand where they're at.
They need to help us
Let me
build an
help
animal
you,
shelter.
help you.
Well, they need to do
And they want to go for sales tax, right?
I don't know. I think they've looked at it. That has been the noise they've made, but I think that's one of the things where we'll ask them to come in and present some of those details on their stuff.
If they go, if that was approved, a sales tax increase, how would that negatively affect us? Because it probably will, right?
It adds to our sales tax in the city.
It increases the overall rate. I think there's two factors. There's two schools of thought. One is obviously as the rate goes up, it may impact folks' willingness to buy or shop in and around Aurora. But beyond that, there's also just the risk to if we ever wanted to go to our voters for sales tax risk or sales tax increase, they're already looking at paying them. Yeah.
It would be interesting to hear from Arapahoe County.
It is. And so,
And they're also stiff-arming, their newer commissioners are stiff-arming oil and gas, so that could be a decrease in revenue for them in the long term. In reality.
So yes, so they've asked to come, and so we're working to try and get that on the agenda.
Another risk to the projection is just trusting auto use tax. In the past being bearish, and then it would beat our projections, and then it was gravy for us. Now that we're going to start trusting the lead's projection, we got to hope that it's right. Possible recessions. So there's your three recessions. We do have that 5% recession reserve. That would have covered the one I did back in 2001. It would have covered the COVID that Bill Levine did. It does not cover Jason's recession there. So there's your risk to your projection. I think that when they're talking about the fact that the economy is operating near full capacity, the risk is more downside.
Right. How much do would have to increase the reserves to protect ourselves from Jason Bachelor recession?
From the Jason Bachelor recession, double.
What's
I mean, it was 3 years, and we weren't keeping up with our projections at any point in time. I would say it's 40, 50 million. 10, maybe a 10%. It would be a lot.
When you start getting into recession forecasting, you really start getting into, and typically the fun of it with economists is they're like, hey, we've been in a recession for 6 months, and you're like, oh, thanks for the update. They start talking about the shape of the recession. So you'll see here, the most recent one, the COVID one, they very much call it V-shaped. It dropped off, came back very quickly. They called my recession a U-shaped. We dropped off, we stayed flat, we finally came back. And then the Greg's recession, they called the heartbeat. It was interesting. They were up and down, most of it kind of below the line. So it was interesting in terms of how it performed. The .com bust on that one was interesting, but that's typically what you get into when you start talking about a recession is how long, how deep, what does it look like? So now, if Greg hasn't said it, and I hope to not steal your thunder, Leeds is not projecting a recession.
There is no recession built into this.
Really?
So preparing for it is what you do.
But are they predicting obviously predicting slow growth? Because
Slow growth.
You've got a slowing economy and you still have inflation. So I don't see the Fed reducing rates.
So that is actually typical, right? Economists don't typically put a recession into a thing. They'll come through and say, prepare for one, or plan on it, but it's hard to expect. something like that happening. And even if it does happen, it's hard to expect what the heck it's going to look like. I mean, the Great Recession was called a Great Recession for a reason. There was a lot of factors out there that went bust all at the same time. Oh, by the way, I do have a piece of good news. So I was talking about the fact that that Moody's saying, full capacity is such like that, and people aren't saving. But what they did say, there's a relatively low debt burden in the nation, right? So debt's going up, but it is nowhere near the debt that it was here.
Except for the federal government.
Yeah, I was gonna just say
Right over there, I don't know.
33 trillion.
All right.
Go to the congressional budget.
Let me switch gears on you for a second.
But they give us credit for it.
Part of the problem.
We're going to talk expenditures. Our 2024 expenditures, basically slightly under budget, a little bit under budget. Salary savings, compensation is driving about 50% of those total savings. All of the other savings is probably timing related. So anything else that we're seeing is just haven't gotten around to spending it yet. This looked a lot like what it looked like last year. A lot of vacancy savings, covering addition-driven expenditures, covering additional expenditures, overtime, acting detail pay, leave payouts, signing bonuses, all the things that we have to do because we have turnover. We've got to put more money into other categories of personal services. But we do have some savings at the moment, about 1.7 million.
Are we going to have robots for those vacancies with the AI? No.
I'm writing that down.
For the budget director, yeah.
I've been a robot for years. Let's talk turnover. Brian, thank you very much for giving me these charts. You'll notice we've been dropping off since the high point in 2022. We're now at a projected trend of about 12.6%. Interestingly enough, this is good news. But when you start comparing it to other things, we still have a lot of vacancies. So this, right here, through the first quarter was probably about 180 vacancies in the general fund. All right? This is about 140 vacancies in the general fund. Okay, so that's good news. Before COVID, in 2019, there were 88 in the same time frame. Okay, so good news, but we're nowhere near out of the woods back to pre-COVID levels.
So we are subject to that 1.9 to 1 ratio. It is still a difficult hiring environment.
It's still affecting us, yes.
Are the vacancies concentrated in any one particular department or just across?
Not a department. I think we have some areas, different areas that they're kind of spread out. I'm going to look over here at Roberta and Laura. Still have difficulty hiring for some of our street.
Yes, streets, rows, the main front line.
Yeah.
And then, Greg, are you including uniforms in that or not?
Yes.
And so, yeah, obviously, we have we have some significant vacancies in police. We're getting ready to announce, or hopefully, not announce. We'll have our numbers here for our summer class. We're hoping to make a significant dent on obviously those police vacancies. Chief, you're fully or
-3.
-3. So we're down 3 in fire. So pretty close to fully staffed on that. Tina's shop is, again, very close to fully staffed on the public safety side. Good numbers on fire and 911, making progress on police. So those last two academies of almost between 60 and 70 folks have started helping us make progress.
Of your 140 vacancies, 49 of them are in public works.
Wow.
So there's your big one.
You get a free car if you.
You get a car. You get a car.
Are you going to drive yours? They're going to drive yours?
All right. Yes, ma'am.
She's got two.
They can drive yours. Yeah, you got a spare.
Yeah, on vacancies with marshals.
Currently, we have 8 vacancies. We have 2 in background, so we're doing a little bit better thanks to a lot of help with HR and improving our process for hiring. So right now, our shortage is in female officers, but we're targeting them and hope to keep making improvements.
I'm going to say we will probably not get back to 2019 levels until that chart that shows how many vacant positions to how many unemployed gets closer.
Can I ask a question? So beyond the police and the fire and these other departments, I mean, what is it? Is it something culturally within the city? I just want to finish. Or is it other cities are paying more, or do they have more of a better package that maybe people are leaving to other things, or people just going to different occupations? And I'm talking beyond police and fire.
Yeah, sure. I think we'll let Ryan kind of fill in that. So there's two things. There's the turnover, which is why people leave, right? And then there's the other side of that. How do we fill that position? So Ryan, you want to kind of give us a quick summary of generally what we're hearing both on why folks are leaving us, and then what we're seeing in terms of how are we competing?
Yeah, and some of the department directors should probably speak to within their own departments. I will probably start bigger level. Usually a 10 to 12% turnover rate is what you see as a healthy number. So I do anticipate that 12.6 number being higher by the end of the year, maybe in that 14% range, because we see a big amount of retirements. So the healthy turnover you see is in retirements, career advancements. I think the inflationary aspect, the wage inflation, is still a little bit of a concern just with all organizations. So I'll say, at least on my assessment, at a macro level, we're in a lot better spot, and I think we're getting there. But we're not hearing trends about people moving for benefits or for some of those like one little items. I just think this is just a natural process for us. But I don't know if there's any department directors that might have some insight on what's happening within their groups.
Yeah, so I actually just had this conversation yesterday with street operations. We are down 17 folks in the streets. We are trying to get hiring. We're going to work with HR to do some more outreach and stuff. The difficulty is a lot of times folks get into these positions and then realize it's not right for them. Operations is very hard work. Brooke can attest to that too. And you're on call and you're 24/7. So we are working hard on it, but we are still seeing sometimes they start and then they quit within a couple weeks.
Councilmember Gardner.
So are we going to do any comparisons? Because there's this connotation going on that we have a high turnover rate, but we've had conversations before. Our turnover rate is actually much lower than. Okay, Jason's
you're jumping ahead. So to hold that thought, we'll kind of put it onto context.
I'm not saying the number is whatever. This was a conversation, even when Mayor Hogan was here, why people were leaving.
Because
so I'm not trying to
0% is never going to happen. Right? That's not realistic. And so there's retirements and career advancements, and there are actually healthy reasons for turnover. And so I think it's better to compare to other cities and the private sector and places like that to see how we compare, because if you take out the healthy turnover, that's really what you want to get a sense of. And I think we probably compare pretty favorably with other cities and with the private sector, I'm going to guess.
Councilmember Drewski.
Yeah, I just have a question. For some of these jobs, like streets, and I don't know, some of these other departments, Councilmember Zvonek has pointed out before that I live like a Colombian drug lord. And I have a lot of felons in my life, multiple. Do we hire felons? Do we hire felons for any of these positions?
We have a matrix that determines whether someone can or cannot be that. If it's outside of a time period, generally speaking, it could be 10 years. If they have a felony outside of that 10-year period, then they would be eligible for a hire. But that's just generally speaking. There's a matrix that's set up for that. It's based upon the position, the department, so there's a lot of different factors. But we don't wholesale say we're not hiring.
So it has to be at least a 10-year-old felony.
It depends on the type of felony, depends on the type of position. If someone has a felony that has to do with, sexual assault.
Well, yeah.
So it's complicated in that sense.
None of that.
And do you have to bond them?
I'd have to follow up with you on that.
I worked in the staffing industry, and we used to have to bond if we hired.
No.
Go ahead.
People that are more recent.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
So in pros, we have.
Please listen up.
In pros, we have about 40 vacancies. We have a handful of offers out right now. We have been going through a restructure, and so several of our vacancies are higher up in the leadership team, and we're recruiting. We're also changed some positions, and we're recruiting on that. So we've done some work for career advancement within the department that's created some vacancies. And then when I speak to you about pros here in a little bit, and recreation, I'm going to be offering up, I think it's like 8 or 9 cuts as well. And so there are programs that we're watching carefully, and I am cutting positions if those programs, and we're cutting those programs out if they're just not financially viable anymore. So we're doing some of that. I also will say that most of our vacancies are in recreation. Aquatics is tough for us to hire, and we're continuing to, we've just done some restructuring in aquatics. So we have some key, I'm going to say mid supervisory positions that we're working to fill, but we've done a lot of restructuring. So I think the number is much better than when you heard it a year ago, because I think it was well over 100.
Okay. And I want to suggest contracting for those things which are competitively done in the private sector.
And that's what Brooke said, it's part of their effort.
That's what
It's going. If we could, real quick, the other one I'll point out is, just real quick, we do have some departments that are working very closely with HR. Sometimes when we're looking for folks that we need, I'm going to say skilled labor, right? Like, so the example I'm going to use is in our fleet, right? We need mechanics, and we want them to have all the ASE certifications and those things. It's a difficult market out there to like get folks with those certifications to come in. So what we've done is said, you know what? We'll train you. We'll get you that certification. So they've worked very closely with HR, and we're targeting trade schools, pick-ins, where we're going in. They don't have those certifications. We're going in and saying, that's okay. Come work for us. We'll train you up, and then do that. So it's a difficult environment. We have to be creative, and we're trying to do that.
Cherry Creek Innovation Campus.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So, but let me say again, so last week I went to visit a business in Aurora that sells and services on a separate maintenance agreement, heavy equipment used by municipalities. So again, I think that we're a lot of municipalities are underusing contracting.
Yeah, and you heard Greg, I mean, that was one of the costs on the fleet fund. We do contract out, we call that subletting, so exactly that. So for some of those large pieces, that absolutely, Mayor, you're right, that remains an important part of our tool to making sure we're getting services.
With the maintenance contracts.
Yeah.
Okay, please continue.
And Councilmember Gardner is absolutely right. If you compare us to...
Can you say that a little bit louder?
Only this time.
Absolutely right. Only this time. If you compare us to the state, to the federal, and especially to the private sector, we're less in almost every category every year. All right, so that is good news.
I'm not the one worked up over turnover.
All right, so the plans for general fund balancing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to analyze our one-time funds in order to balance 2025. We want to track the implications of this on future balancing. All right, we've got to make sure that we're not spending one-time funds on ongoing things. But things we must do, we've got to balance our previous pro forma out of balance by $5.3 million in 2025 and $8 million in 2026. And it does include the loss of OPT starting in 2025. We're going to cover some known issues that weren't part of our pro forma. The risk fund I talked about, we may need to cover some of the claim costs, that increasing IBNR that he talked about. We're gonna shift that over and see if we can have the general fund maybe take on a little bit of that, the worry out of the risk fund. Health insurance, typically we put a 5% projection into the pro forma. Hearing that this year it's probably going to come in closer to 10. Covering that 10% will be about $1.8 million. Big one that's going on right now, we've got union negotiations. The impacts of the union negotiations are going to affect this and anything over our pro forma. Basically, long story short, this year is going to look a lot like last year when there's not going to be a lot of significant amendments in the budget. All right, service level activity requests, SLARs, we're not doing a SLAR process, just like last year. All right. We're going to balance 2025. Cuts are possible / likely in 2026. If I take into account all of this stuff, with the leads revenue as it is, we've got about a $15 million shortfall in 2026. Now, by the time we come to you with the one-on-one meetings, it won't look like that. We're going to be working on it. We've got some time to work on it. But at the moment, that's a pretty big negative number, yes.
However, with all the vacancies that we're having a hard time filling, are cuts really going to happen when you have vacancies that aren't filled?
So there's, as we start looking into the toolbox, that is one of our tools that we can use is to look at the vacancies and look at what we're doing.
And remember, as Greg said, so sometimes that, yes, we're not spending that on a filled position, but depending on the operation, depending on what's going on, we're having to spend it on overtime, we're having to spend it on contracting those services out. So just because a position vacant does not necessarily mean that there's not an associated expense with that. With that, there may, in a lot of cases, you're seeing an offsetting expense.
I have a quick question. So looking backwards, how many, or do you have the data that shows what the projected revenue was versus actual, going back 5 years? Because if I'm recalling this right, going back to my going on 3 years on council, a couple years on CABC, it seems like whatever the projection was, we've been over it by a pretty healthy amount. And I know that's not always the case, but I wonder, like, over the last 5, maybe 10 years.
And I can show you that, absolutely. The one thing about it is that during COVID, revenues went nuts. And prior to that, we were a lot closer. But yeah, we always project conservatively.
Yeah, that's right.
And so 1% is $5 million.
Yes. Yeah.
So.
Because right now, we're 4 above projection.
We're 4 above.
And so, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there is a chance that we could grow.
There's money to be made in.
Without increases to
That,
balance, right?
from your mouth to God's ears. Absolutely.
I know,
Any other questions on that?
Other questions?
All right, let me keep going. Plan for the capital funds. I told you we've got some additional funds. We're going to focus on finishing what we've got and working on what, I love the term, Laura gave me, pain points. Things we're hearing about, animal shelters, traffic calming, medians, continuing to fund the master plan projects that we put into the budget last year. And once again, local matches. My favorite thing to do is to spend other people's money. So the more local match funds we have, so the more we can spend other people's money. Couple slides just on the risk fund. Spending in the risk fund has been more than doubled since 2019.
Did you already?
2019 was about $10 million. The last 3-year average has been over, it's about $10 million in 2019. Last 3-year average has been about $20 million. Total costs are up 110%. Premiums are up 191% since 2019. General liability claims are just all over the board. Last year was a pretty big year, $6.4 million on liability claims. That wasn't even the biggest year we've had. That was a couple of years back that we hit our high point in liability claims. But you'll notice there's just a lot of spending going on here. And we've got to be prepared. We've got to be able to handle it. That's why you saw why you're seeing a supplemental. Is for us trying to cover this.
Greg, has there ever been analysis of going more to self-insured with a high stop loss?
Hey, Renee, did you hear that question?
I heard part of it. If you could repeat it, that would be helpful.
Yeah, is there a thought of going to being more self-insured with possibly with a higher stop loss a policy or just completely self-insured?
Well, we do have higher stop loss by default. The carriers were not thrilled about insuring municipalities, much less those of us with police departments. So we've increased our self-insured retention on the general liability side. In 2018, we had 500,000 across the board. It went up to 500,000 and 750,000 in 2019. In 2020, the law enforcement liability went up to $1 million, and we stayed at 500,000 for everything else. And in 2021, when we switched carriers, we had a $1 million self-insured retention for the entire city, with the exception of law enforcement, which has a $3 million self-insured retention. And the limits for law enforcement liability have decreased from $10 million to $8 million. And unless we are willing to spend more on premiums to bring that tower up to the 10 million, we kind of are where we are. I don't know if we could take on any more self-insured risk. We could definitely have our actuaries run some numbers to tell us where we would be at. But looking at where we're at now, I think that would possibly cause more financial hardship for the city if we were to take even higher self-insured retentions.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And then I've beat the IBNR horse to death, so I'm a little bit about marijuana funds. Marijuana funds are this is the wholesale prices. They're actually ramping up a little bit, which is good news. The good news to me, when I was here a year ago, I was like, I have no idea where the bottom is. We're seeing a huge drop in marijuana prices. It's ticked up, which is good news for me. Bad news is we're now at 33 consecutive months of negative year-over-year growth.
It's not a trend.
Not a trend.
All right, it's a trend.
So, what does that mean? Right now, as of right now, 2024 year-to-date revenues are currently about 12.5% below last year. All right? The Colorado Department of Revenue is expecting that this weakening, this sort of blah sales to go throughout 2024. And as a point, 10% reduction in revenues. The general sub-fund portion of marijuana would be about $675,000 less. Homelessness would lose about $245,000. Youth violence, a little bit over $122,000. We're going to plan for that. We do have some ways to come through that. There's some money that we're sending over to the Capital Projects Fund that we can limit. So we will be balancing this fund as well, but it is an ongoing concern, and there's not a lot of free money sitting around there to spend in 2025. With that, do you have any questions or any input or anything else? You've asked a lot of questions already. Is there anything else regarding the budget?
All right, anybody got anything else? I think Councilmember Drisky has a plan to increase demand. Could you tell us about that?
For marijuana.
For marijuana.
For marijuana. Oh, hey, it's the 90s out there. I own bars. They're selling it back on the streets because we passed it to death. I know exactly what's going on. They're still smoking it. They're smoking it everywhere.
Any questions? Okay, how long?
Thank you very much.
Let's do a 20-minute break. The time is so at 10:20 we'll reconvene.
I didn't realize it's snow. Is that snow? Please tell me that's not snow.
I'm getting ready to go look at it. You were doing the same thing I am.
My husband was in Denver and said it's really good. Gray, Deputy City Manager, here to talk about my most favorite topic in the whole wide world, capital and federal grants. Katie's gonna help me advance. So just as a reminder, we have several tools that help us fund capital projects in the city. Pay as you go, you heard a lot about that from Greg earlier about our capital projects fund. Multi-year financing, these are general obligation bonds, certificates of participation, district bonds, and other financial mechanisms that are typically borrowing money. And then the last is one we're going to focus on today, which is federal, state grants and opportunities. So just to remind a little bit about federal capital projects, we talk about this a lot. There are some attributes about federally funded capital projects that we wanted to remind you about. So first off, unfortunately, typically a federal funded capital project takes longer to implement. There are a lot of requirements from the federal agency that we have to fulfill, whether it's testing, environmental clearances that we have to receive, and those approvals and clearances often have to happen sequentially and not concurrently, which provides for and results in a longer schedule. There's a lot of procurement and labor requirements like Davis-Bacon, Build America, or Buy America, Build America that we have to conform with, additional quality control, quality assurance, project oversight and administration. So ensuring, on the administration side, we have to report back to the federal agencies, we have to track expenditures in a certain way. So there's more administrative work that goes into a federally funded capital project. And then cost. So because of all of these additional requirements, there's typically about a 30% cost increase in federally funded projects. And then last, the most important part of this is matching funds. So to be competitive for a federal grant, you typically have to overmatch. So in generalities, the requirement for the federal government has been 20% matched, 80% federal funding. We're now looking at 40 to 50% in matching to be competitive. I will share, in looking at the last several rounds of some of the infrastructure bill funding and discretionary programs, that match amount has been around the 40% mark. So, and it varies, and we'll get into that in a couple of slides. So just to set the stage for the conversation, going back to the 2023 Winter Workshop, we brought forward an analysis of our capital master plan and several transportation projects that were evaluated to determine if they were eligible for some of the infrastructure bill opportunities coming out. And those were, we'll show you those in the next slide. But what was approved by City Council was to continue looking at grant opportunities, evaluate our financial capacity for the matching to ensure we can be competitive, look at our projects to make them more shovel-ready so that we're ready to go to construction, to be really successful in that grant pursuit, and then continue to look at funding partnerships to get us to that finish line and put these projects forward. Next slide. So in the 2024 budget, this is a table that's in there that shows currently with what we've been awarded, we had a lot of success with the Transportation Improvement Program. Last year, I think every project we put forward to Dr. Cog, we were awarded funds for, which is incredible. So with that being said, we have about $22.7 million that we're leveraging and outside funds, or what Greg calls spending other people's money, which we love. And a lot of that is going towards design, environmental clearances, partnership projects like the Adams County Safety Study, and signal improvements. And I'll get into a little bit more of those details in the next slide. So I'm going to highlight for you that some of these are referenced, some of these are not referenced on the prior side. So 56 in Hudson, we just got notice that we received the Protect Grant, $10.8 million in funding for that program. And we are currently awaiting further guidance from FHWA on how we move forward. We're seeking approvals to spend funds in advance. Public Works has been progressing design on that project to get ahead and have a more on the schedule essentially. So more information to come on that. We just actually received an email yesterday with some further information. So more and more starting to come out. 13th Avenue multimodal improvements, planning, business development have been pursuing funds for this project, 2 of which have involved resolutions from council. We were awarded a DOLA Strong Communities grant for $2 million and are pursuing another grant, which council approved the resolution on at Monday's meeting, for another $2 million. That will be matched in partnership with AURA and the developer of there. Adams County Safety Action Plan. This is an important action plan that we're working on with Adams County. And what this will do will evaluate a lot of transportation safety needs across the city. And a lot of the grant opportunities that are out there require that we have a safety action plan. And by doing this plan, this will fill that requirement. So we'll be able to pursue further dollars for some road improvement safety across the city. On signals, we received $1 million to replace traffic signal equipment across the city. This will be invested in every ward. There are specific regional corridors that we have to spend this money in, but that will support some of our equipment needs in the city. And then the Traffic Management Center and the Communications Infrastructure improvements. These are involved intelligent transportation systems investment that improve transportation safety and mobility through advanced technology and advanced communications across the city to help us move traffic better, connect to our fiber network, and you see the status of those listed there on the left. Next slide.
Just on the traffic, when is the timeline? I was trying to read.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. So we're still awaiting approval from CDOT on the IGA and drafting that up. So we're anticipating bringing that forward to council in late 2024. And then design starting right thereafter with construction planned in fall of 2026 for both of those. Yep. So going back to what I referenced earlier with the 2023 Winter Workshop and the transportation project candidates, these are the list of the top tier projects that were evaluated for infrastructure bill opportunities. Council has seen this slide many times over the last couple of years. And what we wanted to update you on here today, you see the gold stars listed there. So as we've evaluated grant opportunities, notice of funding opportunities coming out, these are the applications that we are actively working on preparing. So for the Peoria Bridge reconstruction, there has been a bridge investment program that has received additional funding through the IIJA or the infrastructure bill. And we are seeking to submit an application for that this summer as it comes out. This project has been under design. We have Dr. Cog funds to complete the design. And so our hope is to pursue those bridge funds this summer. The Montview Complete Streets project, we are seeking to pursue the RAISE grant. The RAISE grant, the notice of funding opportunity will come out in the fall of this year. We have begun to work on the required cost and benefit analyses. There's a lot of analysis, a lot of details that go into these grant applications, a lot of engineering. So we have started working with our consultant on that. That will be complete, and concurrently we'll be working on narratives for this application. So we're anticipating a February 2025 deadline to submit for this next race cycle, and that's been based on prior cycles. Havana Street Corridor is another one. We have an earmark submitted for $2 million. I'll show you that on the next slide. But we are looking at other opportunities to advance the Havana Street Corridor study that was approved by council and the recommendations in that study. And we've been particularly looking at the neighborhood access and equity grants or reconnecting communities. This program received additional funding through the IRA or the Inflation Reduction Act. And so we've been heavily monitoring that in upcoming cycles to understand opportunities there to advance needs on Havana. ADA compliance and sidewalk needs continue to be a need across the city in all of your various wards. We have been receiving funds through Dr. Cog for that. There is another Dr. Cog cycle coming up soon in the next year, couple of years. So we'll continue to seek funds there and look at other opportunities as well. Alameda over I-225, the bridge replacement, we received a Dr. Cog grant to progress design on that. So once that is ready and further along, we look to seek bridge investment funds for that project. And then last, Gun Club Road, we've been working very closely with the South Aurora Regional Improvement Authority, SOREA, to look at partnerships opportunities there to help finance that project, as well as we are implementing DRCOG funds to complete the design on that as well. So progressing along, yes.
The range 7 to 17 million, and that's on the local match. What why is it such a range?
That would be if we were to pursue the raise. So that is 20% to 50% of the cost.
Oh, okay.
Just recognizing, and remember, these are total cost numbers, so anything we've received, like the DRCOG grants, will buy this number down.
Okay.
So we will have to do a calculation on actually how much is construction, how much the match requirement is, and if there's other in-kind credits that we can take advantage of, that will also bring that number down.
Okay, so whatever SOREA brings to the table, whatever Arapahoe County, and
Correct.
then buy down, and then, so we could hit the 40% and then apply.
Yeah, we could do a 30% match and everybody picks up 10%, right? So yeah, like, so
Yeah.
that's.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a couple of roads we could take on that, and also the DRCOG tip cycle. So this one is in the regional transportation plan. We could also pursue DRCOG funds in the future as well. Any questions on the grant? Okay. All right, next slide. Okay, so as I mentioned, buying down the project. So we've been putting our thinking caps on and trying to pursue every opportunity we can to gather funds to support these projects. So you see here recently the congressional directed spending announcement came out to submit applications. Thank you all for your support in approving going forward with these, but this is a summary of the earmarks we have put forward. These are still pending. So these do also require match funds, which we've taken into account for. And you'll see the scope on the left-hand side. These are the detailed scope elements that we put forward to complete on these various projects with those funding. We're also continuing to look at other opportunities and other federal grant programs. So a lot of federal agencies are continuing to refine requirements, certainly those under the Inflation Reduction Act. There'll be funds coming directly to state programs to apply for versus local, so we're continuing to monitor that. The Defense Community Infrastructure Program, you hear a little bit about this from Marshall in a couple of slides. There may be opportunities for Aurora Fire here and some of our other facility needs adjacent to the base. So we're continuing to monitor that. Housing and urban development and other housing programs to see if there's opportunities to take advantage of those. And of course, any state grant opportunities that might be available. In terms of matching funds, so we proactively set aside funding in the capital budget to support the match needs, and you saw those totals on the prior slide. Cumulatively, the box in peach shows what we have available net, anything we've been awarded from DRCOG, as well as best case, if our congressional directed spending requests go through, that will be about the $2.2 million in match funds that we need for that. So conservatively, this is what we have available in match funds, and we're continuing again to run numbers to better and refine that amount of match funds that we need to support the projects going forward. I'll turn it over to Marshall to talk about the Aurora Water opportunity.
Yes, so just briefly, Aurora Water, the water utility space has been interesting in the grant world. Going back about 15 years, there weren't really grant opportunities out there for water utilities. There were low-interest loans that made no sense for large utilities. That world has evolved a lot, so we have recently been awarded a couple of grants, one for a radial collector well up at the North Campus, to increase our prairie water system capacity. Another one for replacement of large valves and aging pipelines in essentially the Ward 1, Ward 2 areas. And more grant opportunities are coming along in the water utility space. So we also have applications pending for lead service line replacements. We're hoping to get a lot of funding there. And just 2 days ago, 2 days ago, I think, we were notified that we have been awarded a PFAS grant It's just for design, so it's a low grant. We went into that process pursuing the design grant so that we could pursue the larger construction grant later. That would be for our Cherry Creek wells. So good news on PFAS. We won't hear back for a little while on lead. And then this opportunity hit our radar this year in conversations with Buckley that Liz was very helpful in. There are some interesting opportunities with the Defense Community Infrastructure Program that would focus on improvements not on a military base, outside of the base, within the communities that would benefit directly the base. And so one of the things that's exciting about this grant opportunity is, as Laura mentioned, a lot of these grants you have to be aggressive with your matching dollars. This one, what we're being told is that's not necessarily the case, that it's a 70-30. The grant provides 70% of the funding. We would be responsible for 30%. And you don't have to be aggressive in the application. What you have to be aggressive with is the partnership with the base. So we've been coordinating with Buckley. They're excited to pursue these opportunities over the next number of years. But next slide. This year, what we've identified to pursue is a project at our Wemlinger Water Purification Facility, which will directly benefit the base. They're interested, or they were interested primarily in water and cybersecurity. So we actually were able to find a project that merges those two worlds. It will upgrade our communications system from infrastructure that's 40 plus years old out there. And get the electrical equipment and the communication equipment current, safe, much safer. We'll go from the 4160 volt equipment, which is, you don't want to mess with that stuff. We've been trying to switch over to the 480, so this will switch our equipment out there, upgrade our SCADA communications equipment, and meld the communications cybersecurity space and the water infrastructure space. And the base is excited about this. They are going to provide a letter of support. This application is going in here within a couple of weeks. And I think the project's about a $20 million project, and we'll be pursuing 70% of that funding through the grant opportunity. So more to come on this. We will be pursuing this in future years, whether it's in water utility spaces or other spaces or both. That's the other thing we'll try to figure out this year is, can we submit more than one application for this grant program to support the base? And again, all the infrastructure that this grant focuses on is in the city of Aurora space, not on the base. So exciting program. So a bunch going on in the water utility space in the grant area, which wasn't true even a decade ago. So thanks.
So last slide. So today we're just seeking endorsement from council to continue our pursuits, continue working. We will bring forward updates to you all as we go forward. And obviously we'll continue to look at other opportunities as we get more information.
Any other questions?
Does the Fitzsimmons campus have opportunities for grants uniquely to medicine and bioscience?
Oh, for infrastructure or
just,
specifically?
yeah, I suppose, yeah.
Montview.
Montview, yeah, that's one of the projects that we're pursuing at Green Pond. Yeah.
I should ask Dustin.
Further questions? Yes, Member Gardner.
So what else are we looking at besides federal grants? Because, we already talked about Arapahoe County possibly going to the ballot. So I guess what I'm afraid of is we're going to miss our opportunity to do something like that. Like just, I guess, essentially continuing down the same path of federal grant opportunities, which is great. It's somebody else's money, but it's not going to address the entire list ever. And I know we've talked about, like, probably 3 years ago, should we go to the ballot? But we've never really gone back to that conversation, and I'm not sure why we haven't gone back to that conversation, or if we're going to go back to that conversation, but at some point, if Arapahoe County does it and others do it, we're going to miss our opportunity. and I don't know if that's a question for staff, if it's a question for council, I don't know who it's a question for, but we're continuing to go down the same path, and we're not going to address $1 billion of need. I mean, because when I was elected to council, this list was 600 million. 5 years later, now it's $1 billion. We're not going to address this list by federal grant opportunities. This is great, and huge kudos to staff for the time that they spend on this. But again, we're not going to address this list by federal grants. That's not realistic. So
Well, I don't think that conversation was really ever concluded. I think we had it. I think that there was a consulting entity was working on it, and then it just kind of died. But I don't think it died because council made a decision.
Yeah.
I don't think a decision was ever made.
Well, that's my question is where are we going to go back to that conversation? Like, what's the status of that? Because we've never gone back to it. And I agree with you, Mayor. We didn't kill it, so.
Well, we kind of did, because we were like, well, now we're too late. And we always talk about it in the spring workshop, and then it's too late. Like, we really need to be talking about this in the winter workshop.
every year, but-
so that we're ready to go and start the outreach process in a reasonable amount of time. Because we did kill it. We said, this isn't going to work, we don't have time.
Well, yeah, we're too late for the 2024 ballot, but we're not too late for the 2026 ballot.
Right, no, and that's, we need to have the conversation soon.
Councilmember Bergen.
Years ago, who was the firm that presented to us that they looked at campaigns and?
So yeah, we did have a conversation, and actually where we were at a point where we were ready to award a contract. Council did say no. Council took action to say we're not awarding a contract to move this forward. So what staff has done in that interim portion is trying to continue to focus on other ways to fund projects. So you've heard we focused on federal. We have looked at the ability to do some other funding options, and then the main thing we've worked on is trying to update our master plan so that we really have the underlying piece of that, that we know what the projects are, we know what the needs are, so that we are ready to engage with the public, with the community on what are the needs out there, again, and what they will support, because what we think are the priorities is certainly important, but the main question is if we're going to the voters for a ballot question, the question is really what will they support in terms of what's on the ballot.
And
so
the last time we went to the ballot was what year?
We've gone to the ballot.
I mean, I know we went once about the police.
2015,
I was going to say, yeah, like 2015. I think we've gone a few times in my 15 years. The last time we got something approved was 2001.
Yeah.
When, oh.
2015 was to re-extend the Alameda overchange. To re-extend that, the voters said no.
Correct.
That wasn't even a new tax, that was just to extend that way.
Yeah, and I think there was a couple times in the interim between when I came in 2008 and there, so I think we've maybe gone 3 different times.
Because one had projects, right?
One of them had projects.
But the problem was they didn't cover the whole city, I don't think. Maybe they're.
Again, and Laura can weigh in, you want to have that list of projects, but what you really want to do is get that considerable public engagement to get the community sense of what their priorities are, what they will vote for, because that's really the most important piece.
Can I piggyback on that? So we came to, it was in 2022, at one of this a spring workshop, and we talked about a strategy to go forward to build credibility for the city in delivering projects, and at that point it was Build Up Aurora. And with that, we did a campaign, a communications campaign to say, hey, we're doing our job. We're conscientious of the city finances. We're taking care of what we need to. We're spending our dollars wisely. And so there's, at that point, we hired 2 contractors, both Catalyst as well as Atkins. Atkins has been helping us stand up our capital program internally, so the capital improvement master plan, they did a lot of work with us to stand that up. They've been doing some other work on costing of projects to make sure we have good numbers. So all the internal organizational needs that we needed to do to be able to successful to deliver a bond program. The Public Works reorganization, we have a project delivery team now, so all of that's happened internally while we've been implementing Build Up Aurora, as well as communicating about our success in doing that to build trust and credibility with the community.
But Mayor, just to put something in some context, I don't think it's just me and Councilmember Bergen were on the council, and at the time it was 2017, and I was the mayor pro tem. We did have Mayor Suthers come here and do a workshop at the Capstick, and they were kind of giving us some input about how they did the campaign in Colorado Springs, which that tax, and it's multiple improvements there how they pass that. So
And with the sunset clause.
with the sunset clause. So just to give some context on that, it even goes back to that timeframe.
That's correct.
Further questions? Is there any objection does council support the continued pursuit of outlined federal grant opportunities? Is there any objection? Okay, that's the direction.
Thank you.
Sure, but we can either take a quick break and start again here at 11, or we can roll right in. It's whatever the preference.
How about rolling right into this, and then we'll do lunch? Okay. Any objection? Okay, let's go. Recreation fund.
And I have a few staff coming in that contributed, and I'd like to introduce them first, and so if you can just give me a couple minutes here.
Yeah.
It hit me this morning.
Yeah, I told them that.
That's their job.
How to get it full.
Is like,
Maybe that's what. All right, it's not that way. I'm ice cream.
change the culture.
There's one seat way over there, Donna, in the corner.
You.
And I think you might have to grab a seat back there. I think one of those are broken. Doesn't want it. Anywhere? Much longer.
He is like a victim's advocate, like coming.
I checked, there's no out there.
I thought we had one of
Let's do this thing.
Well, it would be way more than $30,000.
All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, City Council, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Brooke Bell, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. And I will be speaking about the Recreation Fund and our plan. I have some recreation staff here today that contributed to this, and I would like to recognize them and introduce them. And I will start with my finance and budget manager for the department, Tom Tully. And then with regard to recreation organization, I have Derek Tripp, who's the superintendent over all things sports and the sports fields. Donna Hunt, superintendent. She's over back in the corner. Thank you, Donna. She's over preschools, the summer programming, all youth programming that's not related to sports. Beth Iacono is not able to come. Beth is over the older adults and special services in the department. And then Winter Steger is over all the facilities there, thank you, superintendent, and also handling aquatics right now. We have a vacancy there. And then Joe Sack is the manager of recreation. And Joe recently announced his retirement. He will be leaving us in about 8 weeks. Is that correct, Joe? Yes.
He just started. I want to retire too. Good call.
A lot of people want me to retire.
So, thank you. All right, the agenda for today, we're going to talk about some of the customer service improvements we're making. We have I'm going to share results of a survey, talk a little bit about some input we received from the PROS master plan regarding cost recovery. speak to cost recovery briefly. We shared some information back in the fall with you, talk about a path forward for financial sustainability, which does include fee increases, and then a multi-year plan to grow revenues, and that's what we really need to do to make this program or the recreation fund successful. And then talk a little bit, finally, I'll end up with golf. And golf is doing great, so it's nice to come and talk about golf when it's a wonderful place. So we did a recreation or a reorganization. The entire department did a significant reorganization this last year. And this is the recreation side of it. I am adding a deputy director of recreation services. We have been recruiting for that, and we're still in that process. That deputy director will have 3 managers reporting to them, and that's the managers over large facilities, and you'll see off to the right or in the middle there, the manager of large facilities, what those areas of responsibility are. And then the manager of smaller facilities and special programs, and then also manager of golf. Nothing changes there. We'll have the 5 golf courses. This organization has over 140 FTE. In December 2023, we did a survey of the 3 largest recreation centers. It was Central, Southeast, Moorhead, and we had over a course of a month, and we had over 700 responses, and I'll speak to those just, yeah. So I thought it was a great outcome. Overall, we scored very high on all 5 categories that we tested: cleanliness, safety, staff, programs, and customer service. If you take the excellent, very good, and good, we are over 90% positive. So very impressive. And especially when you all heard some of the things that you've heard from the public over the last 18 months. I feel staff have done an extraordinary job improving on the cleanliness, and also we've done some things with safety, and things are much better in the organization. So thank you for your support there. Customer feedback. We always hear this: more hours, open earlier, close later, add hours on weekends. More basketball. Also, we hear more pickleball. Fitness classes, we do need to do some work there, more fitness classes. Weight equipment, add more weight equipment. We have great weight equipment. We're going to add a few pieces, and then we'll replace the weight equipment at the Center for Older Active Adults. Older adults. We'll be doing that. And then add football and lacrosse at Southeast Recreation Center. We do have those leagues set up. Warmer pools, I always hear about warmer pools. It just depends on what you like. The customer service for Moorhead and Central, we got compliments of welcoming and awesome staff. For surf, we got the comment about better scheduling, better communication on the gym and field house schedules. We have improved that, and we did respond to that. So overall, I thought it was very positive. All right. So improving the patron experience. What's in green here is we've made accomplishments. What is in black, we're still working on. So this is a huge accomplishment for the public and staff. We have private security that is in the centers. They are the same security service that you see here at the AMC. They are consistent. They bring us the same security personnel to the facilities. So facility staff and patrons get to know them. They are approachable. They get, like I said, they get to know the patrons, and we're getting extraordinary service, and I think people just feel much better when they're in our facilities with this group here. We also, Mayor, we heard you when you asked us, could we transition from full-time custodial staff to contract custodial staff? We have done some significant transition there, and I'll be talking about that a little later. We have replaced the vacant custodial positions. As they go vacant, we don't fill them with new employees. We just allow them to go. We're going to cut those this year. And then we still have 2 more FTE there. But the custodial, the contract custodial, great service. So, and I think you've seen that from the public. You're not getting the complaints from the public as well. We are also advancing the use of professional services agreement. I'll talk about that a little later, but this is just a list of places that we've done it, and we're in areas where we're exploring. We're getting ready to pilot a drop-off childcare center at Central Recreation Center based on the survey. We're looking at punch cards for specialty classes when we get more of our fitness classes set up. And then at the end of this year, we do expect to transition to a new recreation software system, if that process goes well. And then we are also looking at things at the Southeast Recreation Center. Derek Tripp did a lot of work with, he communicated with different field house organizations across the Denver metro area, he got a lot of learnings, so we're benefiting from those learnings. And one of the ideas that came out of that was to stand up a skills bays or batting cages at the field house. And they actually would literally, it's a netting system that drops down from the ceiling. And then we, again, I had already mentioned fitness equipment. Oh, it went, let's see, I'm not going forward. Let's see, let me try this. Okay, oh, too far. We got that. Okay, we've all heard about the PROS master plan, and thank you very much for approving that. One of the aspects of that master plan was there was an institute, it's the Epley Center for Parks and Public Lands, completed an evaluation of our recreation programs. And they recommended that we set a specific fee policy. I'll be talking about that a little bit later. I feel like we've done that. Address staffing shortages. We have fewer staffing shortages. We're paying a competitive wage. We've made a lot of progress in that area. And then reduce barriers to program access. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Publish criteria for reduced fee programs. We do have a scholarship program, and then applied structured systems, planning, feedback. That's, we have our first survey from the citizens, and this is a work in progress. I put this in from the PROS master plan just as a frame of reference. If you look at the top 3 items that citizens responded to, 51% responded to upgrading existing parks, recreation facilities, and paths, trails. We do have, we'll be bringing a capital plan, capital budget forward through the budget, or a plan on capital investments forward during the budget process. But it is, we have older facilities, and this is an area where the public does want us to put some focus. And we'll put some work around that. Historical cost recovery, and this is the meat of the presentation today. If you look at this is 9 years of our costs and our revenues. And if you look at the blue line on that, that is cost recovery. Prior to COVID, our cost recovery, our historical cost recovery was on the order of 60%. COVID was no friend to anybody and or any business. And so since then, we've been recovering. Our cost recoveries are on the order of the 40%, a little bit more. We also, during that time, you can see where we added Moorhead, Central in 2019. When both those facilities came on, we had great revenue. They still continue to produce significant revenue. Moorhead's a little smaller neighborhood facility, but it's doing well. COVID hit. We, as a city, made decisions on staffing Our part-time staff, which is on the order of 700 to 800 seasonal staff, were all laid off. Our full-time staff, we maintain those salaries and we maintain those positions. Many other municipalities laid those staff off. We did not. And I will share with you, those staff were working in jobs across the city. If the people that were here that might remember that. We had people at Animal Care, we had people at the, over at Central, working in Fleet, doing odd jobs that anybody needed help with. We had full-time supervisors on deck at swimming pools, acting as lifeguards who were certified. We put people to work wherever we could. So our costs were a little high during that time. We also, and then we experienced, I think I already said this, the wage growth and the inflation, and then Southeast came on, and Southeast is doing much better than it was early on. So we always get asked, how do we compare to others with regard to something? And so I just added this as far as the national average for cost recovery is about 40%. We're about 45%, and I'm going to share how we can do better. And then Colorado Springs and Denver are unique, and I'm going to answer questions about that if you like, but it primarily Denver, when they debruced in 2012, they asked the voters for permission to use those revenues for recreation. And so they fund recreation differently. And then also Colorado Springs uses the model where their larger centers are owned and operated by the YMCA. So there's the primarily difference. We will be looking at a combination of revenues and expenditure reductions going forward. So our path forward, I think I've shared all this. We want to ensure that the centers are financially viable. We'll be looking at different cost recovery models within benchmarking. We'll focus on 3 top areas for revenue, address revenue increases during 2025 annual budget process, and I will share the ask here in just a few minutes. So you saw this in October. This is the financial sustainability model that we showed. Councilmember Hancock, you weren't here for this, but what this shows is that for services that are individual use, or benefit, or rentals that are individual benefit, primarily individual benefit, they would be higher on this continuum. You would expect those to be more expensive and to recover more of their costs. Where you're looking at open access or things that are essential to a good life, maybe swimming lessons, those would be more affordable and where they would have a lower cost recovery. So the areas that we're looking at, these are the areas where we have the largest revenues. This is in youth sports. It is in facilities emissions and our sports rentals and aquatics. So our current cost recovery is 49%. Our expected cost recovery based on this model is about 55%. We're making a recommendation that includes affordability and also addresses cost recovery. We're recommending a 10% price increase. This is for this is for facility admissions. And it also looks at the benchmark. And so you can see here how we plan to increase the adult annual center fees. And then I also have the family annual center fees. Are there any questions about this? I know that you all had your slides. Yes?
We talked about this years ago, the non-resident fee for recreation centers. Are you increasing that? Because I don't remember, but if it seemed like it was pretty low.
Sure.
25%.
I'm sorry?
It's 25% of the resident fee, so that will go up as well.
It'll go up?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And the, sorry, on the Southeast Rec Center, you and I have had these discussions, obviously, and I had a constituent of mine come forward that represents one of the baseball leagues.
Yes.
And so he said they have so much money, he had no idea the field house even existed, and had he known, he would have rented it specifically during the winter season, when they need those practice times or whatever. Then they go to Sports Park 1 for, for their leagues or whatever. So I know you guys were developing a marketing plan to try to, make sure that we market the field house. Are we also, what are we charging? Because he said, charge whatever you want. Like, he was like.
And I'll speak to that in a little bit, and we did connect with him, so I'll share that. We
Okay.
did connect with him, so thank you.
Okay.
And that's exciting because he does plan to use our field houses in the summer, which is where we have a low period. It's less, popular. People want to be outside. But he is willing to use the field house in the summer, and I'll speak to that a little bit. But thank you for that connection.
If you could speak to the issue of lifeguards, because I think there has been a shortage of lifeguards over the past few years. I know the state intervened temporarily to try and help, but can you tell us where we are with lifeguards?
We are currently recruiting for our lifeguards. We'll be doing our trainings here in another couple weeks, correct?
We're having one today.
Oh, one today, okay. We probably have a pool closed today then, because we're doing indoor training. And we'll have, we expect our pool hours to be the same as last year. Okay?
Any further questions?
Okay. So I'm not going to go into the details here. You can see how much we're changing the annual adult fee. I think we're still competitive, actually on the lower end a little bit. And then also the family annual center fee. So at the bigger centers, Southeast, and the family is 2 adults, 2 children. So the bigger centers, Southeast and Central, the proposed increase is from $600 to $660. Again, you see where it is on the chart. On the right-hand side is the proposed. And then for the smaller centers, that's the lower orange, or the orange bar that's on the chart that is the least amount of money, and that's going to go from $340 to $375. We, again, believe these are small increases, and we do have a scholarship program that I'll just briefly address here shortly. Our fees have not changed. Our fees have not changed.
There's a question.
Since 2019.
Sorry.
Okay.
So Moorhead, I know it's smaller, but it's almost half the cost or the fee. So is it, they're paying that much less because they have less activities, or?
I would say there's fewer amenities, and then it is a smaller facility.
But it's not, it's smaller, but it has a pool, it has a lot of the amenities that the others, so it's smaller footprint. I'm kind of surprised how much lower it is. Are we subsidizing that area, basically?
Moorhead, look here real quick. And we could look at that. We could increase it, but Moorhead, I want to say is, the cost recovery in Moorhead's about 30%. So.
Lower income.
I just think it's really interesting, Utah Park just has a pool. It really doesn't have anything else, and it costs more than Moorhead, and I'm just wondering why. Because we have the school use Utah Park.
We do. We have a contract with the school that does use Utah.
So at some point, let's take that offline and talk about that, because I knew there were some plans to talk about, adding some extra facilities, eating space and like that onto Utah Park. So I'd be interested about this fee schedule and where that money is going and why it's the justification for it.
Okay. And back to Moorhead, if council does want us to look at that and increase that fee, we could go back and look at that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we should look at it. It looks, I could see that it would be lower, but that's almost half. And so to me, it says that the other rec centers subsidize that rec center for the community. I don't know if you do it based on income and that.
We haven't looked at income. I will say, we're building off what the original fees were, and so our starting point is based on what the current, I want to say the current fee is. And that's our starting point, and we're trying to be respectful of that.
Without going too high.
Yes,
Yeah, no,
yes,
I get it.
yeah.
So you had mentioned just there's 30% cost recovery there. Do you have, so you do have the breakdown by rec center? That would be,
Yeah, that'd be
because I think that might answer.
That might answer my questions.
Okay. And, I mean, I can share that at the end of this presentation, or I can share it, I can send it out. Okay. All right, and so the scholarship program that we have is, again, it's a 50% discount on memberships. It does not include drop-in fees, per the details. All foster children, if you are on assistance, or if you have an income that is 50% or less of the HUD standard, we just look at the tax return when someone brings that in, or if you're on other Medicaid or food assistance. We are a youth, or we are Aurora's youth. This is a free program during school breaks. And so all youth 13 to 18 are free at the centers for spring, summer, the entire summer break, fall and winter breaks. We will not turn away a child as young as 8. We do have people that drop off their children, and we'll find something for them to do. These numbers, I would just caution when you look at these numbers include both membership scans and the free youth scans. And so it's all youth using this program during the summer, but some do have memberships and some do not.
Question?
Yes.
So you said it's 13 to 18 is the youth program?
Yes.
But if someone drops off an 8-year-old child?
They're free, and we will put them in, they will
But who's supervising them?
Our staff.
Oh.
So I can just drop my 4-year-old off.
Not a 4-year-old.
In like 3.5 years, I just got it built in, just.
During the summer programs.
Well.
We do, I will say.
Who's paying for all these summer camps that all these kids are going to, and we're just doing it for free?
And I will say, staff have spent time trying to track down those parents. It's just, it is it's the environment we live in, and staff will try to track down the parent, but we will not, if we can't track them down, we will not turn them away.
Well, then you call the police and report them as a missing child.
So I noticed the advertisement for the free meals especially in my schools. So is that tied to like at Utah Park, they have the free breakfast, free lunch, and then the activity? Are those two things connected?
So we have a partnership with APS during the summer, and they will have a food truck that goes to all our different, not all of our, but a lot of our different parks, and will set up at a certain time. We post the schedule, and they will provide lunch for kindergarten through 18-year-olds. Again, they won't turn kids away if they're younger or a little bit older, and then they will also set up at our recreation centers as well.
Do they show school ID?
No, they do not.
They just roll up and say, I want to have.
They roll up, and people will drive up and get out of their cars and get free food. And they're really quite good meals. I mean, there's the milk, there's things that kids like, and they even have a homemade option like a burrito or enchiladas or whatever they're offering that day. Plus, they'll do like peanut butter jelly sandwiches or something. Go ahead.
Okay. Liability, so if a child is unsupervised by a parent and they get hurt by equipment, are we liable?
How do you want to, yeah,
I didn't quite hear the question.
If a child is unsupervised and they get hurt by the equipment, are we liable? I will say we will not allow them in the weight rooms. We have staff that monitor our weight rooms, so we won't allow kids of a certain age on our equipment.
I've seen kids at Southeast Rec Center in the weight room, unsupervised.
Okay.
But also, excuse me, I mean, we might just be getting kids from Denver that are just being dropped off that are 8 years old. They could be coming from who knows where. I didn't know about all this. Going on. So if this is this equity piece, we clearly have taken that out of this. So I think we need to revamp that whole program. And ATV cards?
Do you know how often it happens where we have the young kids?
This program is designed, it's recreational play. It's not a licensed childcare program, so kids can come and go as they please, but it's free access. So the kids that really want to be there, the families that want them to have a safe place to go, this is an alternative for them. And so they come in and we have organized activities. Some of it is just drop-in play. This program is run from noon to 7 during breaks. So kids can start coming in at noon. They usually have drop-in activities, a lot of basketball. We're very positive with basketball. And then starting around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we have organized activities, different things that we provide, that sort of thing. The thought of with the younger kids is that there are kids that are teenagers that want to be a part of this and come, but they also have to be in charge of their siblings. So what happens at that point? Either I can't come in or I'm going to bring my sibling. So we allow them to bring their siblings in. Some younger kids can come in. We just try to make it age appropriate. So you don't have necessarily a 9-year-old, trying to play basketball against an 18-year-old. It just doesn't work. So we find some different activities for them to play and that kind of stuff and just make sure everybody's in a safe place. According to our rules right now, an 8-year-old, even outside this program, an 8-year-old can come to the rec center unsupervised. They can.
I'm done.
They can. When we find those things that happen, we do talk to parents about the appropriateness of it, what are they able to do and that kind of stuff. A lot of them, again, are being brought in by an older teen. The older brother wants to go play basketball.
I can understand a chaperone, a teen chaperone, but just nobody?
There are occasions when that does happen. It's rare, but it does happen.
A chaperone that sees his or her friends and goes and starts playing basketball, and now we have an 8-year-old wandering around.
Can you tell me a little bit about how long we've had the free lunch program?
How siblings
And
work.
Is it rec centers and parks?
It's rec centers and parks, the free lunch program, and it has been going on, it's since COVID, and APS is funding it. We do not fund it, we provide the locations, yes. And I'll look into this more.
How many meals are typically distributed for lunch in a week's time?
Donna, do you know the number, do you remember the number from last year or on a week time frame or by the whole year?
We did 150,000 meals last year.
We did how many?
150,000.
Who was it? We, APS.
APS did 150,000
17
meals.
sites that they drop off to, both recreation, library, and parks.
And they pay for the total cost, vehicles included?
Yes.
We would pay for one of those meals.
Nope.
Okay. Okay, please proceed.
Okay, so aquatics, this is the swim lessons. And so we're recommending a small increase here based on affordability and benchmarking. And here it is. This is $29 an hour is what we, or $29 for 4 classes. It's what we currently charge. We are recommending $40 for 4 classes. If you look at rentals and sports, this is the sports park and our big ball fields where we have rentals going on. We would expect, because these are for primarily private users, the independent youth organizations, the tournaments coming from out of town, that we expect the cost recovery to be much higher than it is. And so we are recommending an increase here. That ranges the current rate for, and these are the baseball fields, multi-purpose fields, soccer fields, and the synthetic fields at APS, or a sports park. We're expecting, here are the rates that we plan to change. We do believe we have a product that's much better than most providers in the city, and so our hourly rate will increase The range will increase from $38 to $70 an hour, and then the proposed tournament rate will increase to $750 a day.
That's pretty drastic right there.
Well, we're way underpriced.
Oh, okay.
So,
I've seen them over 1,000.
and again, we have not changed fees in over 5 years. So revenue generation, we do have professional services agreements, and the contract terms are negotiable. Most of them, we receive 40%, and the contractor receives 60% for the service. If food's involved, our share is much less, and their share is much higher. Here's an examples of what we've done for martial arts, tennis, sports park concessions. I would like to say with sports park, prior to COVID, we would spend over $300,000 on concessions, and we would be lucky if we brought in $200,000. So we're looking for different opportunities at sports park to provide concessions, and we've talked to Councilmember Drinsky as well, to improve that offering without having a huge expense on the city. We also are looking at other things like fitness classes, learn to swim programs. There are limitations on what we can do with professional services agreements. It has to do with the financing at the, it has to do with the tax-free financing. We are limited to 10% of the annual debt service. So the two newer centers, Cirque and Central, we are going to be limited to about $250,000 a year because of the debt service payment. Sports Park will be debt-free next year, and Moorhead is debt-free, and so are the other facilities.
Why is that?
I'll explain it. Basically, if you have private use of a publicly funded facility, you can't have more than 10% of your revenue coming from that private use, or it will make that debt
Oh, you get the rate, I got it, yep. That
Oh.
makes sense. Okay.
Well, just, is that, I mean, it will help though to have 250,000.
Oh, sure, we will look for opportunities there, yes. I'm just saying, yeah, there are some limits though. Okay, so here are some adjustments that we plan to make. I'm not going to go through all of these, but we have positions we are going to cut in different areas. These are vacant positions and temp wages. We also, I spoke to custodial. We are cutting custodial positions, the vacant custodial positions. We have 2 remaining. When they go vacant, we'll cut those. And then we have 1 cooking position that's vacant. I'm also recommending that we move expenses from the rec fund that are associated with the pool maintenance. We have 3 people. And then also the pool chemicals to the Conservation Trust Fund to give relief from the Recreation Fund. Contract security, so those are the reductions, the 1.3 million. Contract security and custodial service add back nearly $1 million. So we're also looking at revenues from our professional services agreements. And the fee increase here would add nearly $580,000. So we have a net benefit of $1.1 million to the rec fund, and so that's our first step in cutting and transferring expenses and adding revenue. So our multi-year plan is, again, we would like to increase these fees with your permission and do an increase of 10% each year in these particular categories. Through the 2025 budget process, we'll review other fees and bring those forward with fee increases as well. We do need to grow the revenue, and then look for additional opportunities. Would like to plan to do a financial feasibility study and look at the underperforming centers, Beck, Utah, Meadowood, and what nominal, I'm going to say modest investments can we make and grow revenues there.
So is the ask 10% every year in perpetuity?
It's for the next 3 years.
And then what after that?
We will continue to evaluate our costs and our fee structure.
But there will be smaller incremental increases?
So the 10% is for those primary categories that I've shared with you. We're also going to look at other fees through the 25 budget process, and then we will look at fee increases again the following year. But we are wanting to do you are wanting to do 10% in those 3 categories over the next 3 years.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I guess what I'm getting at is I don't want to get back to where we go 5 or 6 years without a fee increase and then we have to do such a large increase. I think we should be doing smaller increases every year, so it's more manageable.
I agree.
This is a lot.
10% is not hefty.
Yeah,
This is
a big lift.
That would be consistent with how we handle other fees. You all know as part of the
Yeah.
budget. We typically look at, you're exactly right, Councilmember, inflationary increases every year as part of the budget. Don't get used to it, sir. You're correct. It's typically what we do. Council actually years ago set a policy that we are supposed to look at inflationary increases. We've moved away from that a little bit recently because of COVID, just some of the challenges there. We obviously have some catching up to do, but moving forward, you can expect inflationary increases at a minimum.
We do that in the golf fund.
But this is the 10% each year for 3 years is basically to catch up.
And it'll be nominal.
And quite frankly, focusing more on that cost recovery portion of this. So sort of, I think just, these are certainly much more major changes and really focusing on what should our cost recovery be? And as you've heard from Brooke and her team, they've looked at not only the revenue side, but also controlling some of those expenses and some of the other things. So this is a comprehensive approach to try and get to going back to, not to share all the love with you, the Councilmember Zvonik piece of this, that KPI in this case is going to be the cost recovery piece, right? We're looking at a cost recovery piece and we're putting in place a multi-year plan to focus on our cost recovery percentages.
Question. So I understand, of course, the importance of increasing cost recovery. Part of that, back to your previous slide, is resultant from cutting programs that would typically serve youth. I understand those are programs that aren't being utilized currently. But is there any examination of reinvesting some of those revenues into programs that youth do use, so that we're still maintaining kind of a higher level of utilization of our centers by youth, which is then doing something positive, pro-social, and engaged with the community instead of other stuff they could be doing?
We'll have to look at that. I feel like we have a very robust youth program, but it is fee-based. It is fee-based, and to reinvest in those programs, I feel like we have a lot of investment in those programs already. I'm not sure. We'll have to have more conversation around that, what your specific idea
Is there a need to increase investment to maintain a high level of participation, or is our current investment sufficient to maintain that high level of participation? Like, to say, are we seeing a shift from gymnastics? That's not a good example because there have been a lot of struggles there, but from football to other programs that you may be utilizing higher.
Right, we don't use football, we don't do football anymore. We would be, I think we continue to grow our soccer programs, we fill them. Our sports programs, our summer programs are full. So we continue to invest them. We do, and that's one of the areas we're going to have to look at fees, because those fees haven't changed and our costs are high. And so we're going to have to, there's two things going on. We have to increase our revenues, we have to grow it to be sustainable, and we'll continue to invest in employees to deliver those programs, but there is going to have to be a balance on how much we can deliver versus affordability. I hope that makes sense. So,
when we talk about the youth programs, I'd be curious just to see how much funding comes in specifically from the youth programs per year. If we're letting children in for free, we're giving scholarships, we're accepting EBT and CHP, in these youth programs, how many are actually paid?
You have we can look into that.
Get that information.
We'll get that information for you.
And I just,
Councilmember Hancock, then Councilmember.
Well, then also, while you're looking at that, can you look at, because I keep going back to the 8-year-olds, and I want to see where the age banding is there as the kids that are coming in utilizing those services, because, I know there's a lot of heartburn around unaccompanied 8-year-olds, but 8-year-olds, I call mine the wrecking crew. So rather have them out on the street, have them in a rec center, at least there's somebody watching them. So I'd like to see what those actual numbers really are.
We'll get that based on what data we have. I don't know how much data we have to differentiate.
So you don't track that at all?
We track it by entry. Yes, we can.
Okay, so you can know how many 8-year-olds are showing up on.
If they have a pass, if they're paying a drop-in fee, we don't record their age.
Maybe that's something we should start looking at, maybe, just to get the, accurate statistics. I think a combination of both is important. Kids that just show up, kids that get pay the fees, that kind of thing. I think it'll help really shore up the argument about why this is important and why we're spending money doing it, and how much of it is public dollars, because somebody's paying for it, so who and how? And we should look at who we're serving, and if it's really efficient, if it's a good use of our dollars, if it's a good use of time and energy, if there's staff to support that. I mean, you can justify that based on the number of people that you're serving.
Councilmember Coombs, then Councilmember Lawson, then Councilmember Driscoll.
and I think also Councilmember Gardner's had his hand up. So, right to that point of we want to understand who we're serving, and we do want our kids there in a rec center rather than out on the street. So I think we do, we want to have cost recovery. We want to be as fiscally responsible as we can be. We also want to make sure that we are providing safety and services for our community. And sometimes that's going to cost us money. It's not going to cover its own costs to invest in these programs that are about creating and maintaining a community that is safe, that is healthy, that is thriving, and where our children have the opportunities that they need, even if their parents can't afford to pay for them.
They're not paying anyway.
Councilmember Lawson.
Yeah, my question is just on some of the programming. So, nowadays, the young women now are doing flag football. That's kind of a new concept that's coming out.
Hearing about that.
So I'm just wondering, are we looking at the new programs that are coming out that would probably get interest of more of our youth involved as well? And I know that one's a big one that's really coming out as well. And then my question also too is, why is there so much, a little bit of pushback from city staff on pickleball? And if constituents who want this pickleball, because we're not using some of these tennis courts, we want to get rid of some of them, is that where residents can do a petition or try to fight City Hall that way to get pickleball courts? And youth like those as well. I mean, that's kind of a new sport as well. So I'm just looking at the programming, and are we meeting up to the times of what's really happening in our community as well?
Okay. Let's see, then Councilmember Driscoll.
Yeah, so I went to I've stopped by some of the teen nights, kids nights at the Salvation Army, and they say they welcome everybody, but they just say, give what you can. So I don't understand, I mean, $1, $2? So they have to stop at the desk, and we have to have accountability, some sort of accountability for 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds. I think that charging nothing, is a failure. I think for a lot of these 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, I used to have to do a whole bunch of chores, and earning $1 made a huge deal to me. I got to do whatever it is I was doing. But I just think for many reasons, there should be a charge. I don't care if it's $1.
Okay.
Councilmember Gardner.
So I'm still having a lot of heartburn over the fee increases.
Okay.
Is there a reason why it has to be so aggressive? I guess what I'm wondering is, is there a reason why we're wanting to get to a certain place? Or could we just essentially start increasing our fees at that smaller incremental amount now? Because what I'm afraid of is, are we going to reach a point of, similar to like marijuana tax, where you tax something so much or you fee something so much and people stop using it. We've seen that in cannabis, where we've taxed cannabis so much that the black market has proliferated. And what I'm afraid of is, if we fee recreation so much, I'm just going to let my kids go run around in the park, and I'm not going to go to the rec center or whatever. And, so I guess it's maybe a two-part question. Like, is there a specific reason why we have targeted this 10-10-10? And also, the second part of that is, could we just start those incremental increases now instead of such an aggressive fee increase? Because I don't want those diminishing returns where people just stop using our facilities.
Stretch it out.
Well, we can adjust the fees however we are directed. I will say, when you look at what the transfer in from the general fund is, in 2024, it's $9 million. It is growing. So the purpose of the fee increase is to try to increase the cost recovery and stabilize the transfer in from the general fund. If we're directed differently, the general fund will be picking up more. So that's, it's a balance of increasing fees, growing our revenues, also, trying to find programs that are popular and growing those revenues against what is being managed through the general fund.
Yeah, just because a follow-up to that, because I think there's been a lot of ideas thrown out, and I know you're going to get into that in a little bit after this, but I guess what I'd be curious is, with some of the ideas like Councilmember Lawson mentioned pickleball or flag football, and there's been a lot of, and you're going to get into some marketing about the field house, and what I'm curious is, could we essentially increase revenue that way and not have to be so aggressive increasing our fees? And so could we not, could we slow that down and see how some of these other initiatives are and not get to a point where we're charging our residents so much? Because, it's just expensive. Life is expensive, and, I understand we have costs, but at a certain, some of this is the cost of running a city, is providing recreation services to our residents, and it's not ever going to be run like a business, and so that's kind of that balancing act. And so I guess what I'd be curious to see is, could we let some of those initiatives that you all are working on play out over the next year or two and see what impact that has before we're so aggressive in trying to increase fees on residents?
Okay.
So that's my 2 cents.
All right. So I'm not going to talk about so I've already spoken about this.
If I could go to Councilmember Summer.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. To echo a bit of what Angela Lawson is saying, it's interesting to watch the trends in recreational activities over the years, the decades. 20 years ago, my small business sponsored over 20 adult softball teams in one summer and enjoyed the benefit from that. But that's waned, isn't it? Adult recreational softball has dropped significantly. So is tennis, right? But pickleball is lifted. Flag football for girls, CHASA just approved it. And the fastest growing youth sport right now is girls wrestling. It's exploding. And Chatfield had a wrestling tournament with over 60-something schools there recently. So, if we did something like the fundamentals of wrestling for girls and had some private coaching in there, I think something like that is very relevant right now.
How about self-defense?
Councilmember Jaworski could teach that class.
Honestly, I'm going to join that class. Obviously, soccer is increasing. Has the city have its finger on the pulse of the need for soccer fields? With our incoming population, migrant-wise, that thing is growing, and there's just a demand for soccer fields. What's that?
And lacrosse, too.
So are we gauging the demand for soccer tournaments and play on our fields, and can we convert? I think Lauren was looking into some conversion possibly of recreational. taking our existing parks and converting them with some goals to help accommodate the amount of soccer that's in demand.
Well, I'm going to ask, how are we accommodating soccer now?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've added a soccer league and program into the field house, which now we have hundreds of kids coming in on Saturday mornings to play soccer there, which is great. We have a lot of rentals come through. We work with, Rapids, the Elite, and we're servicing all their programs. So, and right now we're continuing to grow out of Sports Park as well with our youth program. We have I think we went from when I first started here, a few hundred kids in our youth program to now 750 kids now are playing on Saturdays. So we still have a little room to grow there even at Sports Park. Certainly looking out to the future.
But how about tournament rentals? Tournament rentals for soccer?
Yep, so we have tournament rentals through, Rapids, Be Elite. We have a bunch of tournaments throughout the summer that we still serve. We are almost at capacity though for Sports Park when it comes to tournaments. So we have 50 tournaments throughout the spring to fall. So we stay very, very busy there. We try to accommodate at other parks if we can. If we're full at Sports Park, we always use, if we have other parks that have 100 yards of space, we say, well, here's space for you. Certainly looking at other facilities would be great for us. We could, keep
Because
growing.
I heard people in Aurora have to drive to like Westminster to play. There's not enough fields around here for soccer.
We get a lot of Westminster coming to us too, I would say too. Oh, yeah, no, we get from all around.
Does the pros have a relationship with Soccer City?
We do. We've been in discussion with Soccer City. We don't have any partnership right now, work with them. Certainly, we will continue to discuss all the options in that way, but they're a new organization, but certainly they kind of have their own niche too with what they do.
So what I'm hearing is we have enough soccer fields.
At the moment, I would say, yeah, I mean,
Not in Southeast.
Quick comment. So tournaments require multiple soccer fields, and that requires more land mass than a practice field, than a league coming in. And so when you look at the available opportunities in Aurora for a lot of our undeveloped parkland, pros did take a look at that, and there's not enough acreage in a lot of those areas to accommodate multiple fields and the land mass that's required to construct that. So, but we're continuing to look at that and opportunities. I know, Councilmember Bergen, we've talked to you about Sports Park too.
Lots of land by the
Yes, correct. So there are opportunities. Absolutely, there's a strong economic benefit to that, and so that's one opportunity we're continuing to look at. And if I could comment on the pulse piece of this. So that's super important because that guides foot traffic, that guides revenues. And so Brooke had the slide that showed existing rec centers. So we have data around foot traffic on all of our rec centers, what folks are coming for, what programs we're using. The customer service survey informs that. So we also know there's specialty classes like HIT and boot camp and TRX and all of these unique fitness opportunities that are available across, that folks are interested in. So we are keeping a pulse on that. And that then conforms into how are we investing in the rec centers, and especially our underutilized rec centers. What are we doing there to transition that so that we have potentially multi-purpose courts that could have a basketball tournament and then quickly transition to pickleball. So we are looking at that, and that is very much part of this comprehensive plan that Brooke's presenting to you today. The revenues of which that you're seeing laid out support existing service levels to support those things.
Real quick, go back to Councilmember Gardner. So I know we talked about the 3-year 10%, 10%, 10%. And I guess one of the questions I want to clarify with you is, this is not on autopilot. To your point, I think we're going to do it 1 year, that first 10%. We're going to monitor the impact on our foot traffic, on our, are we seeing that fall off from the sticker shock, right? And in which case, that doesn't, just because we wanted to let you know that the plan is to increase that cost recovery. But when we start getting that feedback that, nope, you've priced yourself out, we will adjust that plan. So that 10, 10, 10, 10, that's not autopilot. That's our intent. We're going to watch that because, again, when we're focusing on a cost recovery, well, if folks aren't coming through the door, we're not going to be getting the cost recovery we want. So I just want to reassure you all that that's not an autopilot. This is just, again, a multi-year plan to try and increase that cost recovery percentages.
Councilmember Jaworski?
Yeah, and what you just said, the HIT, the boot camps, well, Orange Theory Fitness is $149 a month just for that membership. Club Pilates $206 a month just for that membership. He used to have a membership at Lifetime Fitness. I have many friends that have memberships at Lifetime Fitness, $248 a month. This is a month, not a year. So when we start talking about going from $600 to $660 a year for an entire family, that's a whole family. Bring all the 8-year-olds you want. That's the whole family. I don't think that there's if you look at the whole market, I'm serious, bring them all. Bring 100 8-year-olds. I don't care, you pay $660 a year, you can bring all the 8-year-olds you want. That's it.
They don't have to be yours.
They don't have to be mine. They're not have to be mine.
Museum for
Councilmember Berger.
Yes.
Have you considered self-defense classes? Because I would take one.
Okay, we'll add that to the list. I know that it's getting late and it's been a long presentation. I have more information that I would be happy to send out. Councilmember Zvonek, you asked about cost recovery by every program or cost recovery by centers and programs. I have that, and I can share that with all of you. Some of it, I will say the two places that I think are most challenging and concerning for me is Utah and also Beck. And these are aging facilities. And so one of the things I'm proposing is we do a feasibility study. We will do this. I'm not proposing it. We will do this. What are alternative uses for those facilities? Because we got significant investment in them. And when you talk about pickleball, and I want to be careful because I don't want to throw out ideas because they always get me into trouble because I don't know what they cost. But if you took those two facilities, could they be converted to indoor pickleball? I do not know. But those are, aquatics is extraordinarily expensive for us as a city to run. It has huge staffing costs. If you change the offering in a facility that is not related to aquatics, it will be much more affordable and it will meet the trends. But we have to look at that. Can it even be done? And so those are things that I do want to continue to look at. What I'm asking for today is, do you support the fee increase that we're asking for? Do you support it as it is, or do you want me to go back and do more work around that? And then I think we need guidance on the general fund subsidy. What is the council comfortable with as far as the subsidy coming from the general fund? Because that is truly what's driving this. It's cost recovery. And we are talking about cost recovery because we're trying to tie it back to the general fund. So if you're it just depends on where the comfort level for council is, because we're trying to get back to a cost recovery that was pre-COVID, and we're also trying to be respectful of that general fund transfer, because we know, based on what Greg told us, that could be challenged in our near future.
Okay. So it's really one question, because they're related, right? If you don't want to increase the fees, then you've got to change the cost recovery.
Yeah.
Councilmember.
Are you not going to go over the field house then?
I can speak to I lost my power. You have it in your
I was wondering,
slide.
it disappeared.
Yeah, I lost my power. I apologize.
Well, the reason I bring that up, because there are opportunities to make up quite a bit of money if we market the field house.
We are marketing the field house, and that was one of the slides in the presentation. Thank you. Most of them, it's not the right size. That's okay. I didn't bring
pull it up for a second. I'll get it up.
Well, and because if we can make up some monies there, then maybe, you're not going to have to dip into the general fund.
We are marketing the field house. We have a very robust marketing plan. I think people have heard it. We have advertisement in the movie theaters. We have advertisement on the radio. We have open houses. It's very aggressive. It is bringing people in. Okay, so I feel good about that. With regard to the field house, we've made a lot of progress on that too. Since you mentioned it was Centennial League. We have the wrong Centennial League, but we got connected to the right one. It is an independent youth organization that focuses on baseball, correct? And Derek met with them, walked through. They are excited about the field house. And one of the things, the work that Derek did with other field houses and through Centennial League, is having those fielding bays for fielding practice and having those batting cages, although they're not cages, having those amenities bring in significant revenue, and it will bring in the IYSOs. And they want to come in there and practice during the summer. And summer is a challenge for us. But with regard to our hours booked at the field house, our peak hours, 90% of our peak hours are booked in 2024. So, and 70% of our non-peak hours. So we're getting the booking. We're also trying to find a balance between the independent youth organizations that are for profit, right? And then also a balance for the neighborhood that wants to use that facility. And then we've got like kids programming, adult football leagues, so we're trying to find that right balance. But they all pay, all of the fees for the field house are tied to a $140 hour fee, which is competitive. It just depends on how much of the field they have and how much they're using. So, you want to add anything to that, or?
Yeah, no, I mean, we're very excited from a staff perspective on the growth that we've just seen over the last 6 months in the way of our adult soccer leagues, our youth soccer program, all the renters that have come in, all the unique renters. And like Brooke said, we do take all the rentals and requests in individually so we can make sure that like a Colorado Rapids is not taken up all the time, where we have neighborhood programs that can come in. So we see a lot of different groups, a lot of different backgrounds coming in. So we're very excited. We're very, very hopeful about the trends that we're seeing right now in the field house.
So my questions for you today are, and I appreciate all the feedback. Does the city council approve the user fee increases for the facility admission, the sports field rental, and the swim lessons that I've proposed?
Does that include the tournament?
That is the tournament fees, yes.
Which is about 150% increase. But it's needed, you say?
Yeah, whatever I showed, I can't remember.
Okay, all right.
Councilmember Summer, anything else?
No, sir.
Councilmember Bergen?
So that, back to what Jason was saying, that 10% will be analyzed.
Yes,
So
as
it's
you've
not
seen.
an automatic.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, this is one where we're going to do this stepwise. You kind of see that this is a multi-year plan. If we see our numbers start to fall off, we'll revisit that.
Okay, further discussion?
Yeah,
Councilmember Coons and Councilmember Gordon.
I'm just still at a point where I feel like 10% all at once is too much. Like, I agree with Councilmember Gardner about just the aggressiveness of this increase schedule, going from nothing for 5 years to 10% all at once. So I would support looking at it again, and that's, understanding that that takes more of your time, and not, I'm sorry about that, but also I think we need to look at something that's a little less aggressive.
The only thing I'll add on this is the 10% is it's sort of the inverse of what Greg has said on our general fund revenue growth. We've been so level that 10%, while 10% is a big number, as you saw, most of the time we're on that far end, that far left end in terms of the cost. So it's 10% on a relatively small number to start with, and so that's why I understand the 10%, double-digit increase, but it's on a small number.
Councilmember Gardner, then Councilmember Bergen.
Yeah, I'm going to object to 10%. I'd rather, I mean, I understand it's on a small number to begin with, but that's because we haven't increased fees in 5 years. That's not the residents' problem, that's our problem. I would prefer to see a smaller increase and then see how some of these initiatives like the field house marketing and some of the other things that we're working on play out. So I would prefer to see a smaller increase. That is our error as a city that we haven't increased rates and fees in 5 years, not the residents' fault. And so, and also I just believe that some of this is part of our role as a municipal government is providing recreation services. And so I'm not going to support a 10% increase.
Okay, Councilmember Bergen?
Jurenski.
No, I think you.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I'm actually okay with the 10% because we need to catch up from previous years and then analyze it going forward. So I don't know, second year, maybe we should not do 10%, but I kind of feel like we have to catch up and comparable to the other, municipalities, to other organizations. I mean, I don't think it's that unreasonable. And there's a lot of free. There's free, if you're below whatever income, free. If you're children, you're free, everybody's free, so.
Mayor Pro Tem?
So, and I just want to be clear, if we don't do 10%, it's just going to go to, the general fund's going to have to make up a bigger portion of it, which means that.
Eventually, yes.
Which means that Aurora taxpayers who don't go to the rec center are going to end up paying a bigger portion as opposed to by doing 10%, it'll be the individuals who utilize the rec center. So this is, for that reason, I support it.
Well, you said eventually, though.
Well, yeah, we would have to go back and look at the fund summary. Right, right now, we are controlling our expenses, and we are balanced 5 years. We do need to grow revenue to be balanced through the 5 years.
And we have a plan to grow revenue.
And we have a plan to grow revenue. And we are okay this year.
Okay.
With these cuts.
Is there any objection to moving forward with this plan in terms of recovery? Councilmember Gardner is opposed. Coombs is opposed. Any further opposition? Very well, then that's the direction from council.
Ruben, my guy, Ruben, my guy.
So I think one way to gain a lot of revenue is if Councilmember Driscoll would be willing to do one of these MMA cage matches. I certainly I would pay to go. I would pay to go.
I don't know about that club.
Revenue generation. She would take on all comers.
Hey, I mean, there's a few people out there, I'll fight for charity, Mayor. And they can pick the charity that I probably won't even like, I'll fight for charity.
Okay.
That is it. We have box lunches. You can pick up your lunch on your way out the door. Be careful going home.